All right, let me just share this real quick and we can... All right, we're live, or we should be.
I need to remember to mute your stream before this starts. I mean, I have a lot of practice muting your stuff, but...
Wow, that's not hurtful or anything.
Stream before this starts. I mean, I have a lot of practice muting your stuff.
Okay, just copying the link. I'll just tweet it out and we can get started. Hello, Andrew. You are the first viewer. My discussion of Heir to the Empire with Corey is now
Had to think about that for a second.
No, I was just trying to tag you. All right. Oh, I screwed it up.
Well, you also ruined our chance to have a nice pre-stream joke again, so...
I know. I couldn't really think of anything, though. What's that?
I think that's what most people listen for.
Just like whatever discussion of whatever nasty stuff it is.
The first 15 seconds of the stream and then...
Just gold. All right. Hello, everyone. I see lots of people here. That's good. Everyone, make sure to drop a like on the stream. For those who don't know, because I am seeing a lot of new faces, this is basically our podcast. We record it live first on YouTube, and then we put it up on our normal host. You can find links to everything down in the description. What episode is this, Corey?
I think this is episode 12.
Yeah, episode 12, I think.
So was that the podcast intro right there?
No. I'm just giving a brief intro because I see a lot of new faces in the chat. So, yeah, not the podcast intro. Let me just open it up and I'll be good to go. All right, anything you need to do before we start, Corey?
No.
Okay. Let me just move my windows around. Where'd that go? Hold on, I just lost the notes. I'm a mess, an absolute mess.
Apparently, like this is so unprofessional.
All right. Hey guys, this is Justin, joined as always by my co-host Corey. Welcome to another episode of Tapcaf Transmissions, and this is the one that I think a lot of you have been waiting for. Part 1 of the jewel of the Star Wars EU, the Thrawn Trilogy. Corey, you said you thought this was episode 12?
I think it's episode 12.
It might be 13. I'm not sure. Regardless, this is an exciting one. This is kind of what we've been building up to. And for those who don't know, because I suspect we'll probably get some new viewers or some new listeners for this one, we've been covering the Star Wars Expanded Universe basically on this podcast, starting immediately after the Battle of Endor with the Truce of Pakura. And now we're, 5 years after with Heir to the Empire, Book 1 of the Thrawn Trilogy?
We're 5 years after Endor, about 9 after Yavin, 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really where it peaks. This is...
So if you're going to listen to this episode, you can listen to the next two probably, and then just unsubscribe.
Yeah, we're going to be going for years and years after this, and always looking back to this as our... We're going to be basically the people who are like late 40s, 50s, wearing their like high school varsity jackets.
Yep.
That's Tapcaf Transmissions after this episode.
It's like, instead of like, oh, I swear I could have thrown that football over the mountain, it'd be like, oh, remember when Thrawn was attacking Bimisari? Those were the days. Or not Bimisari, Bipfash.
He attacked a lot of places.
Yeah, well, I guess the Nogri kind of attacked Bimisari, but...
Yeah. If it has a Wikipedia article saying it's a battle, then we got to count it. I'm not sure if that actually does, but I wouldn't doubt it.
It's probably like the skirmish. I bet you it's skirmish. Skirmish on Bimisari. That would be my guess. I haven't looked, but that would be my guess.
So yeah, we're both really excited to get into this book, but at the start of the last few episodes, we've talked a little bit about other Star Wars news for a couple of minutes before getting into the book.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to
let's
quickly mention
let's
Mandalorian
make them wait.
Fallen Order? Or...
Yeah, I mean... I also want to talk about my tracing thing because that's kind of been my personal.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Mandalorian.
How you were hired by Marvel to trace a bunch of ship art, and now you're trying to expose it.
Basically, no. But let's talk about the nice things first because I think both. Did we get to one episode of the Mandalorian on the last time? Was it after the pilot?
I think we did it the night before the Mandalorian started.
Oh right, because it would have been Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh man, that show's been so good. Like it's been episodes 1 and 2 have both blown me away. Like I think The
Hmm.
Mandalorian is like my favorite Star Wars thing that you can watch, not including books, because you don't watch books. But I think it's my favorite thing, besides maybe Revenge of the Sith, since the original trilogy. I'm really digging it.
I actually think the TV or episode, I guess not really TV, it's streaming, but
Yeah.
that kind of format works really well with Star Wars because you get the main plots, obviously, but you also have a lot more room to expand on the broader details of the universe, especially with how they're doing it, where we're getting like I was really afraid that we'd have a situation where it's like you get a couple aliens thrown around here and
Mm-hmm.
there because it's just so much cheaper. And I'd understand why they were doing it. It would be disappointing, but I'd understand
Yep.
because just the hassle of getting everyone into costumes, the budget involved in that.
Yep.
But they've been really good about stuff like that as well. So I'm really excited for what the series is going to be like going forward.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of that too. Like even in the last episode, it was like those little frog or not frogs. They were like,
Those are called Jawas.
okay,
You're the worst Star Wars fan
listen,
ever.
stop. No, those little lizards that like they follow them like when they walk down the, they're like walking through the cave or whatever, or not a cave, through like the canyon, and like they're
Yeah.
just there for a second. I thought that was pretty, like, then those aren't going to reappear because yeah, that's the thing that like I certainly worried about too. If it's going to be a TV show, like how much money are they going to spend on like little scenes or little costumes that will appear once then never again? You know,
Hmm.
like part of the reason why I love Star Wars so much is like because it feels like it almost feels like a living world. Certainly the original trilogy does. Um, you like look at the cantina and all the aliens are like fully fleshed out and stuff. So I was kind of a bit worried that
Yeah.
we weren't going
And
to
we
get
should
that.
probably avoid going into any like spoilery stuff on the podcast as
Yeah,
well before we haven't said anything yet, but just to
yeah.
reassure everyone there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Um, yeah, Fallen Order 2. What have you thought of that game? I think we mentioned that a bit last time. I can't remember, but it's a fun game. I haven't beaten it yet, but I've been really enjoying it.
yeah, we mentioned it a bit, but it was also not out. So
Mm.
yeah, I've never played a Souls like game, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all fairly new mechanics to me. It took me a while to get used to the combat, but once I did, like I always enjoyed the exploration part of the game, but the more that uh, the more that I've played and gotten used to the combat, the more I've liked that as well. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
seems to have a solid story. I'm only a couple hours in. I'm not super far in the game yet, but
Right. Yeah, I was watching some of your stream. I think you kind of ended. Yeah, like it's a pretty long game, and I mean it's hard, and there's a lot of backtracking, so that kind of stretches it out a bit as well. I've been really disappointed of how people have been like spoiling things on YouTube though. Like if you are on there and you watch a Fallen Order video, you get recommended these things that have like final boss fight in the picture. Like I won't say who it is, but or what it is or
yeah.
whatever, like because there's various fights. It's just like
Well, there's
uh,
kind of the same thing with The Mandalorian, where there's a lot of people who won't even have access
yeah.
to it legally for like
Till
6
March,
months
isn't
or
it?
something.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just pictures of certain things all over the
Hmm.
internet, and
That was a
even
weird
from
one.
official channels too, which
Yeah,
it's
like
weird.
that was a weird choice. Another thing kind of weird about the Mandalorian is like I really don't like the airtime they chose. It first is posted at like 5 in the morning or whatever, at least my time. Um, so it's like people who are staying up early or who are getting up early or staying up really late can watch it, but like the vast majority of people cannot. Then those spoilers are just out for everywhere, out
Yeah,
for everyone. And yeah, not a big fan of that. Hopefully, like I'd much prefer if they just moved it to Thursday night.
Thursday night prime time.
Yeah, prime time Thursday night. Have it released at like, and plus that way you can get like hype for it too, like people getting excited. Like watch parties and stuff. I don't know. Like
Yeah,
a big part of like a fandom is getting ready and watching that stuff. So it would be nice, but
yeah. So I think both of our takeaways so far has been new stuff good.
yeah, it's been a nice like not very controversial couple of weeks, which we haven't got a lot recently. So
Yeah,
um,
I think that'll probably change. I don't know. I try to be optimistic,
yeah.
but there are certain, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I've also been, and I mentioned this earlier, the last couple of weeks, I've been doing this project basically with a few people where we're tracking down all the instances of tracing in Marvel fan art. And it started with when somebody, I mean, a lot of people who watch this might be familiar because they're subscribed to the channel, but it started off with someone sent me a picture from the Star Wars Allegiance comic line, and the ships in it, in the comic itself, were traced from models made by somebody who basically sells 3D prints of for tabletop games of ships, and you look at the image in the comic, and they traced everything, including like the little I don't know what pegs, I guess, that the models stand on.
Yeah, like the little support
Yeah,
inserts.
yeah, not good. And that kind of like started off a big thing, and I reread through all of the Allegiance the Four comic arc, and I found out that every single capital ship and almost every ship, I just couldn't find references for some of the like there's a random fighter which isn't even named, for example. I couldn't find references to some of those, but every single one was traced from fan art, and like every day it seems like it gets deeper. Like in my original video, I pointed to the the mainline run of Star Wars. They had the Mon Cala arc, the Mutiny on Mon Cala arc, where there's a bunch of new Mon Calamari capital ship designs. Have you read that one?
No.
No. But basically, it has like a bunch of really weird Mon Cal ships. Like it's just like a Mon Cal cruiser with like wings coming out of it in random places. It's kind of cool because it gives more than lip service to the fact that each ship is supposed to be individualized and whatnot. But just now, before the podcast started, someone sent me the models that those were traced from. So it's like, it's unreal. Like it's way more common than I think people realize. Like we've started like a list, like a spreadsheet, and I think we're near like 100 instances already. This is the last thing I'll say on it because I know people want to get onto the main discussion, but one line, I forget which one it is now, used 12 different fan ships just in one comic series, or I think it was like one four book arc. So it's pretty wild, and hopefully it's going to be my passion project for a while, I think.
Yeah, and I've seen some pretty like bad take defenses of it, like, oh, this is just how comics works. Like there may be certain elements of like tracing for scene composition of like official references they're given, but this is literally just these comics couldn't be made if there wasn't such a large store of fan art.
Exactly.
And like if you look at literally any other comic series, you wouldn't be able to do what they're doing.
Exactly.
Or not literally any, but 99% of any other ones.
Yeah.
Even with like other Marvel comic series. So like the main superhero ones, there may be fan art of there, but it's not like ships where they just pose it however they want. Yeah. They have to like if it's just like clearly someone's group fan art of the Avengers in every panel.
Exactly.
That would be more akin to what's happening here.
You've got something coming out about this on the weekend too, don't you? Are you still planning a video?
Yeah, so I kind of want to just signal boost what you've been doing as much as possible, which in my cozy channel is a little bit more difficult, but there's some stuff as someone who like actually makes that kind of fan content that I do want to touch on. And I've also been talking to Valerie, our concept artist for Thrawn's Revenge, who I believe is in the chat right now, and who basically went to school for more of the industry side of that. Or for stuff within that actual industry, and trying to get what her take is on a lot of what's been said on that, a lot of the actual practices and how it's supposed to go. So
it'd be interesting to talk to like Evil Jedi or someone too, like, or Fractal Sponge, because it's just like it's got to the point where like I'm actually like, it's every time I look at a piece of Star Wars art now, I just like see like
who actually made this,
right? Because like, for example, they released a new poster for the Rise of Skywalker, and the poster has Imperial 2 Star Destroyers on it, despite the fact that that the movie, everything we've seen so far, they're Imperial ones.
Yeah, and this is something that, especially with Fractal Sponge's stuff, isn't anywhere near new. Like I think it's the
No, no,
old
no.
Tor promo materials
Yeah,
where
it's got his Star
they
Destroyer.
use, yeah, they have like one of his like Empire era Star Destroyers
Mhm.
sitting in as, I think it's supposed to be a Harrow in that, or a Harrower in that picture,
Oh, in the picture,
and
there's also the Force Unleashed had a
yeah, his Star
cutscene where his
Destroyer.
Star Destroyer in it, and there's like, I've talked to him a couple times about it, and it's just like it's almost his work. It's hard with him though. His work is so good that it's almost like his modern Star Destroyer models, like his up to date ones, have like they're almost impossible to tell from like an official model. If you can tell, it's usually because they're better. So it's like it's kind of difficult to tell whether or not like what's going on.
I
But
think even the Empire at War box actually had one of his. I think it might have been his Star Destroyer on the cover,
that's crazy. Um,
but
but like
yeah,
for the Essential Guide to Warfare, they're good enough to pay for his art, like his renders and yeah.
yeah. Like there's clearly a lot of places in Star Wars where it happens, but it also seems like it's a bunch of individual decisions. It definitely needs more oversight from
Definitely.
Marvel in this case, and uh, any other individual production company or series production. But it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I like whether anything's gonna happen or not. I don't know, but I think we need someone like with a much larger audience than myself to signal boost it, maybe. But we'll see.
Hmm.
Shall we move on to the actual meat and
Yeah.
potatoes
So
of it?
books,
Book,
books,
book.
books.
Okay, books. So do you want to give a brief? Because I know you're. I think you're a little bit more familiar with. Because you told me something I didn't know, and I'll let you explain. But you're probably a bit more familiar with some of the out of universe stuff that happened with the Thrawn trilogy. So do you want to kind of set the scene sort of for what the universe was like before this book came out?
Yeah.
Like the
So
expanded
I'm
universe in
only
particular.
what I'm going to mention here. I'm only roughly familiar with it. Like I don't know a lot of details. But so the Thrawn trilogy is often seen as like the thing that kind of kickstarted new interest in Star Wars.
Hmm.
It's kind of the Legends book series that people kind of point to that set a lot of the tone. I'm just gonna Okay, so in 1991 is when it released, and there was actually there was a lot less coordination between different elements of Star Wars. There was less of an idea that it when you were making this expanded universe content that it was going to be part of one main story
Hmm.
or one continuous story. That was really like there were still elements of that, but like if you look at what happens in the Marvel comics and how that ties into the Dark Horse comics
Yeah,
and the Bantam books,
it's like
there
the
are
Star Trek expanded
connections.
universe, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's less through lines. There's a lot more places where there were just open contradictions, and that wasn't really seen as a huge problem.
Hmm.
Each group kind of had their own idea of what the continuity was, and they tried not to step on each other's toes too much. But there was also some direct competition between them,
Hmm.
uh, and attempts where they were like actively trying to screw each other over in some cases,
Yeah.
especially between Bantam and Dark Horse. So Dark Horse being most famous for the Dark Empire series, and actually when Timothy Zahn was approached to do or had his idea for the Thrawn trilogy picked up, it was supposed to be set after Dark Empire,
Which were being produced at
and
like the same time.
yeah.
Right.
So the idea was that they were asking him to incorporate some of the things that happened in Dark Empire into his plot, but he was basically saying, "No, I will not do that."
It was basically kind
Uh,
of like a yeah, like excuse my crass language. It almost when you read what happened, it almost seems like a bit of a dick measuring contest,
yeah,
like between Tom
and
Vike and Timothy Zahn.
yeah, and this isn't something that was unique to him.
No,
So we both have, I think, a very high opinion of Timothy Zahn. So we're not saying that in
no,
like
no, of course not.
as a way to like shit on him or something. And especially like the idea of these broader universe canons, collaborative canons like that is at that time, like early '90s, there was a lot less of that.
Yeah, I mean, people like the idea of I think Star Wars, like the Star Wars EU, especially like probably the Legends expanded universe, is almost like a unique, probably at least the time it came out, is almost a unique thing in that, like, the degree to, like, the interconnectivity. Like, if you look at the Star Trek expanded universe, I know very little about it, but I know that it's essentially like does its own thing. There must be hundreds of Star Trek books, and so I think if you think of what an expanded universe is now, you're probably like taking in like the current status of what expanded universes are like because of how Star Wars sort of changed things.
Yeah, and even within Star Wars, like I mentioned, that Del Rey was kind of where that turned around when they picked it up,
Mm-hmm.
and like the NJO, New Jedi Order, so Yuuzhan Vong War,
Yeah.
when that started, that was like their first attempt to have something with a lot of major changes for characters, big impacts, big
Yeah.
continuity changes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the Bantam books, there are a lot that are really good, there are a lot that are less good,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the overarching themes within them is that. Uh, by the time a series ends, very little has changed from the start.
Totally.
So even with the Thrawn trilogy, one of the things we'll see is that, like, yeah, it starts off. The New Republic is setting up. There'll be more set up by the end of it. Same thing with X-wing,
Mm-hmm.
but fundamentally, there's not much that's gone off with the characters. They didn't have any
And
major shifts in what they
compared
were
to
doing.
some other books, a lot happens in this, like the birth of the twins, for example. That's kind of the twins is kind of an interesting one actually, because from what I understand, I think I talked to Pablo about this on Twitter. Well, he responded to some of my questions. It's not like we had some sort of candlelight dinner or anything. But so the twins is an interesting one because I'm fairly certain, because that was like a thing in the first issues of Dark Empire. There's no kids named besides, I think Leia is pregnant with Anakin. But then later, because as most of you probably know, or as I'm sure you'll understand, the Dark Empire was much less popular than the Thrawn trilogy, so it ended up being mostly that Dark Empire had to sort of incorporate elements. It had to work with the Thrawn trilogy, and it doesn't. And Timothy Zahn didn't have to sacrifice really anything of his vision. But really, I mean, Dark Empire doesn't sacrifice that much. The Dark Empire source book does a lot of like the legwork on making the two work together, and does actually a really good job. But maybe there. Someone said it's mentioned in the first issue, but regardless.
Well, that's something that's kind of the tier system that Legends had that was introduced at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, where it was like the movies are the top canon, then you have books, then games, comics, whatever, and then with stuff like Marvel Comics, it was specifically said that the other authors, people could pull whatever they wanted to use from them for future materials, but if they overwrote or disregarded it, then that was fine. Their stuff would take precedence. And then when the Clone Wars cartoon came out, T canon was added just below movie canon because George Lucas was directly involved in them. Which is why it's super frustrating, like making Fall of the Republic our Clone Wars mod, which we're going to be streaming after this. Plug that gets labeled as like, oh, that's Disney canon only. But it's like that. If there's one thing that's not the movies that George Lucas had the heaviest involvement in, it was the Clone Wars cartoon.
Right.
So,
and like, if like people have pointed this out, but George Lucas, he told 12 hours of stories or whatever with his 6 movies, but the Clone Wars is, like he put much more like of his actual. Like that's so much content that comes from his brain. So like, definitely don't sleep on the Clone Wars, especially for like fundamental things about how Star Wars works and whatnot.
Yeah, it's especially frustrating when I see like, oh, George Lucas should have been allowed to do whatever he wanted for the sequel trilogy, but also screw the Clone Wars because that's not like if you wanted Legends to continue, you did not want George Lucas making more movies.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so, because the characters are 30 years older now, so we've joked about this before, so I guess we would have been getting episode 7 Swarm War. The Unseen Queen. But yeah,
It's basically just Starship Troopers, right?
yeah, basically. With except they get a bit cozier with the bugs. There's less bug. Well, I wouldn't say there's less bug holes. They shove less nukes in bug holes. Um,
Whoa,
but
easy there.
but yeah, like there's really, and I kind of want to talk about this later. But there is no real like reality where there's a Thrawn trilogy episode 7.
I don't think that would be good.
I don't
Like
think it'd be
I
good
think,
either. I think they're an amazing book series, but
yeah, they're a good book series, but translating them into film, it would not have gone well.
no. This book is
Uh,
probably the best example of why, I think.
yeah, and can you imagine like a, we're gonna spoil Last Command and Dark Force Rising, I'm sure, many times during this podcast as well.
Yeah.
But can you imagine like the big reveal in a Star Wars movie, like Luke Skywalker?
Yeah. No, that would have been, and like Sabayoth is a good villain and Thrawn is a great villain, but none of them are as evil as the Emperor, so it'd be super weird to go from, the setup of like the first 6 movies to, fighting basically Thrawn and Sabayoth, who's like a shittier emperor, basically.
Yeah, I think a lot of Thrawn being an actual good villain does come from Zahn's later work with him.
I don't disagree.
Uh, he is a bit two dimensional
Hmm.
in especially Out of the Empire, but we get a lot more of like evil McBad guy Thrawn in this than we ever do in anything later.
Yeah.
Especially in how he's talked about in the Hand of Thrawn duology, and then even more with Outbound Flight,
Hmm.
where Zen has an idea of like how he wants it all to tie together, because he was basically in Outbound Flight tying together everything that had ever happened in Star Wars up to that point.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
I think
point.
it works really well,
Yeah, it
but it
does.
does involve some slight retconning to who Thrawn was and why he was doing what he was doing.
Hmm.
But yeah,
And I mean, he definitely he did sort of he made it easy on himself because he even plants a seed for the Outbound Flight in this book.
yeah, they talk about it specifically, but like how that ties into the Vong War, why Thrawn was going to the Empire at any
Mhm.
point, his exile,
Yeah,
what a chiss is.
yeah. It's kind of surprising I mean, we've got some information about it, but still a lot of his like sort of pre-campaign time and like the Chiss ascendancy and like making the Empire of the Hand is still kind of mysterious.
Hmm.
I think that would have been a cool. I think would have been room there for some stuff. Like I more of the Empire of the Hand generally, I think would have been good in
Have you ever
Legends.
read like Choices of One, Allegiance,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other?
yep,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's about as much as we ever get
yeah.
of his time at and like I think a lot of it speaks to just Sun's improvement as a writer and how his style changed from this point, which are some of his earlier books,
Hmm.
to things like Outbound Flight, where the characters do become a lot more nuanced, and that says a lot more about him rather than necessarily like there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm somewhat critical of with the Thrawn trilogy in general, but it's more
Because
comparing it
it's yeah.
to what Zahn becomes later. Like
Hmm.
I still love these books, but there is some stuff that sticks out that I don't think are choices he would have made
I agree.
in later. Like if he were to rewrite the Thrawn trilogy now, which he kind of is, uh, to an extent, but we're going to talk about that.
Hmm.
Uh, that I think it would be even better than what we got, which is still really good.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where I come from with it.
I think what this no, I agree totally. This book is kind of not lacking on nuance. Well, maybe lacking on nuance. I think one of the reasons why it's so loved is because he kind of nails the world building. He
Yeah.
nails the. I think he actually nails the main characters pretty well. Um, Although maybe a bit too reliant on the original trilogy. Um, but he makes like he sets up a compelling universe, and
Hmm.
then you're right. Later on, he makes Thrawn as a character much more interesting. Um, like reading the Thrawn duology, especially like the parts where they're on like at the hand of Thrawn, like the fortress, has to be some of the most like exciting stuff in Star Wars. I think,
Hmm.
like where they're learning about like Thrawn's machinations and like like him preparing to return and like the outsider threats that he's like been getting ready for. Um, and like that works, I think, because this book kind of in this trilogy and everything else sort of give credit to, like, they give it a pedestal to stand on, I guess, and
Yeah.
the credibility, I
And
guess.
like he does really well with established characters. He does really well with characters like Pelion and basically anyone who's
Card.
not, I think, Thrawn and Sabayoth, because he was, I think, I think he was a bit too concerned with trying to make them out to be as big of threats as they were. That
Yeah.
in certain areas he'd go into uh, overemphasizing either how bad they were, how competent they were.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that those are there's I think just two parts in this book that really stand out to me as like taking a good premise falls off a cliff.
I know the first one you're gonna
And
say. Mark Sable.
there's two that I go off on fairly often.
Mark Sable and
And
Kashyyyk. Those are my guesses.
yes,
Yes. Okay.
the ship transfer and
Yeah.
the art.
Yeah. I mean, the Mark Sable's probably a decent
Actually,
place
three.
to start.
There's something with Louis Van.
Let's okay. All right. Should we? I mean, but they do. Yeah. Okay. Should we just start off with plot and maybe
Yeah.
like we can start right off with Mark Sable, unless you want to talk a little bit about like maybe we should set the scene, I guess, first, like what's going on in the universe and whatnot. So the New
good.
Republic, by this point, they've killed Zinj, and they how far is this after after
I think this
X-Wing?
is 1 year
Right.
after. I think Zinj one, maybe two, because I think this is early 9 ABY. Zinj was like 8.5, 7.5 to
Mhm.
8.5,
Right.
but I could be slightly off on
So by this point, the New Republic is like they're not really dealing with external threats. They're really just trying to like get their shit together. Like there's a lot of discourse like within the or discord within the like ruling council. There's like it's almost like factionalism. There's like Borskfalia and Admiral Akbar really are vying for control, and more than that though, there's like a lot of logistic problems with like setting up this like New Republic. A lot of the early book is about, well, all the book really is about them trying to get like the infrastructure back in place. Like there's the Empire spent a lot of time getting, shipping lanes set up. So the New Republic is trying to deal with that. They're trying to deal with bringing new planets into the New Republic, just setting up how to govern and how to rule, which I guess it's less dangerous than less mortally dangerous than fighting Imperial warlords. But I think it does a good job of showing that the New Republic is literally, it comes near cracking a few times throughout
no
this.
Kraken. I don't think he comes up in this book.
Cracking a few times throughout this trilogy. And
Yeah, they focus a lot more definitely on it, like kind of swapping places with the Empire is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Where they're now the legitimate government, and the Empire is the one that's kind of going to the subterfuge and guerrilla warfare tactics that they used to go for.
Yeah. Yeah, because they say specifically that the Empire is down to 25% of their territory, and Thrawn behaves like a rebel for much of this book. He does like hit and fade attacks and stuff, but it starts off on Coruscant. Or is Coruscant the very first scene actually, or is that just the first?
No, I
Luke
think
scene?
it's I think Mark Sable
Mark
is
Sable,
the first
okay.
scene of the book.
Let's talk
over
about
Sky.
that then. Yeah, so the library world of Abroa Sky, which is actually pretty prominent in Legends after this point. I mean, this book, between this book and the West End Games source books, this is like where half of everything in Legends comes in. More than half.
Yeah.
Like the majority of Legend stuff comes from like. So Abroa Sky is basically like, it's mentioned in Plagueis too, quite significantly. But Thrawn, it starts off, Thrawn has just done a raid on it, which happens. We don't actually see it. I guess it's one of his. I didn't quite remember how that happens. Is it? There's like another Star Destroyer performing the raid. I think, isn't that what happens? And then yeah, basically they get enough information for for Thrawn to start his campaign, but are pursued by like a New Republic task force.
Yeah, so four assault frigates show up, commanded by an Elamin. This is very significant for reasons that I will hate later. Uh, but yeah, so it's 4 frigates versus 1 Star Destroyer. The implication is that this is supposed to be a very clear victory for the assault frigates,
Mm-hmm.
but Thrawn, through superior tactics and absolute bullshit, is able to win.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
but you just did a video about this,
I did.
actually.
I did do a
So
video on it. So they say there's 4 wings of X-wings too, but I think Zahn is a little free with like some of his starfighter
yeah,
terminology.
he did not give Michael Stackpole a call with this book.
No, and I don't think a wing is supposed to be. I just said it's 36. There's a source somewhere that says New Republic fighter wings at 36 fighters. He might have meant squadron. Either way,
I think he did.
yeah.
I think it's because each assault frigate is supposed to carry 1 squadron,
Mm-hmm.
and then he called a squadron a wing. Is what I'm
Yeah, and
assuming happened.
I'm pretty sure on a later occasion he misuses the word squadron as well. Either way,
Yeah, that's when Thrawn's going to hit the bar with his squadron of boys, right?
and it's just
Rooks
Thrawn and
above.
Pelion and Rook. Yeah, it's not a squadron. It really bothers me about canon too. They've got Black Squadron. It's like 6 dudes. Well, 6 people. There's women, but what was this? Oh yeah. So they're outnumbered. They're outgunned, and Thrawn basically he is studying art. Presumably, he knows it's an Elam or an Elam commanding the fleet or likely to command him, and
He suspects it and then confirms it
Confirms
with
it.
his first
yeah. So basically,
maneuver.
he challenges them with one of his scout TIE fighters, and they blow a couple up, and he's like, okay, Elamon commands this task force, and he basically employs a strategy which is basically perfectly fit for the situation, and which utterly destroys them.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a like a kind of disorganized strategy,
Yeah.
and the implication is that the Elomen are too structured of a speech. They uh, they don't understand when things aren't structured, I guess,
Yeah.
and just him studying art and knowing the Elomen means he knows that they're not going to be able to do anything about this
Mhm.
strategy,
Yeah.
and it's going to absolutely destroy them based on that. And they could have he could have just as effectively just used everything, taken out the art, taken out the fact that he knew it was that species, and the
Mhm.
scene would have worked much better. Because
Yeah.
it,
Because we there aren't really that many scenes when we get Thrawn actually using tactics. A lot of it's grand strategy. Like later on, he does that thing with the what like he holds the ship in place and uses it as a shield. But other than that, like you're right, it would have been cool just to see him go in and just like annihilate somebody with some like esoteric bit of naval strategy or whatever.
yeah, like the stuff that Thrawn does best. This is something that I think the new Thrawn trilogy and the new canon does much better.
Mm-hmm.
Is it explains his thought process in a way that actually makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and where it's like he's open about like I'm making deductions that are high risk, or
Yeah.
that I think are low risk, high reward,
Yeah.
or if they're high risk, they're high reward, and I kind of understand the risk I'm taking with
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's creative thinking in the moment. Like he does the thing with the buzz droid in the first Thrawn book. There's even stuff he does in this book, like the ship tractor beam kind of shielding thing
Yeah.
that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that all works really well. And there are even some of the cases where the stuff I'm going to complain about has those elements where it's
Mm-hmm.
like he starts off like, okay, he's making this deduction, this deduction, this deduction. That's all good. And then he throws in this piece of absolute crap
Mm-hmm.
that literally makes no sense. And I'd be even fine with having it be just impenetrable Thrawnness and we don't find out what his reasoning is, but it ends up working and having that element of mysterious mystique, whatever about him. But instead, it's like,
Yeah, that kind of just use
hey,
art.
Pelion,
Yeah.
we're going to do this. Oh, yeah? Why are we doing that, sir? Well, I
Learn to
understand that
study
they're going to
art.
do this.
Yeah.
And I've had been in this situation before where I learned this thing. It's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And also, I heard once that 1 + 1 = 3. And then done.
Yeah, it works in some cases. Like it works when he's like this Lewis Vaughn rate. A bit of that works because he's like he knows how this like how like the Lewis will operate when it comes to like letting ships in and stuff. But You're
No,
right.
that's
You don't
just
like
as
that one
bad
either?
because like it's like going to the DMV and saying, I know that's run by humans, so I know
Mm.
how long I'm going to wait exactly, so we don't need someone who can coordinate with perfect timing for this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I see your point. Um, like when I thought of this battle, the way I kind of imagined it is like because they do the Marg Sable, the fighters kind of lose, like the incoming X-wings kind of lose. Um, they stop focusing on the fighters and then they kind of come around the side and just annihilate them, then like move on and destroy the capital ships. But you're right. Not a lot of it makes sense, and I'm not a big fan of that battle. I'm less bothered by like the Kashyyyk stuff, but yeah.
He's very it ends up with the other species being very reductionist as
Mm-hmm.
like this is what they are, this is what they do in a way that doesn't end up applying to humans or Chiss
Right.
or
Because when it's a human, it's like this is what Han
Blancala
Solo
even.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a problem with a lot of Star Wars stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of comes from here. It's just it even if they didn't explain why they were doing these things,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that would work better. But the problem is with all three instances, he explains it too much, and it ends up being like an explanation that just does not work.
Yeah.
If they'd stopped two sentences earlier,
Mm-hmm.
fine. But they go those extra two sentences, and it's just dumb.
On the other hand, what I do think works is the way he sets up, and you only get a very little bit of this. The way he's setting up his overall plan against the New
Mhm.
Republic, like the puzzle pieces he's getting into place, basically. I like that part. Um,
Yeah.
because that's like a kind of that shows like for example when you read this book, maybe probably when you read this book for the first time, you like, okay, Battle of Abroa Sky, why did he even do that? But when you like read it later on, you know that okay, he is doing this so he can find the location of Wayland, or I don't remember if it's for Wayland or Merker. I think it's for Wayland,
It's for Wayland.
and you know he needs the Islamari for not only fighting Jedi, but he needs all of them for cloning purposes. And you know that he needs all of those clones because he's looking for the Katana fleet, and it's just like, or maybe his original plan was to use Rebel fleets. Regardless, I think it works much better by the time you get to Last Command. And you sort of see how everything has has kind of progressed and how he's taken all these little pieces kind of scattered across the galaxy and made a like a legitimate claim to the
Yeah.
yeah.
Like with the cloning thing, actually, that's one of the things that one of the things I think works really
Mm-hmm.
well when you go and do rereads of it, because so much of Pelion scenes are talking about like uh, discipline and experience has kind of been worn down. We're kind of just getting the dregs of whoever we've conscripted. So how can we even blame them for not being that good at their jobs?
Right.
And what Thrawn is doing is basically a direct solution to that, where we can kind of see that through what Pelion says, even if Thrawn doesn't come out and uh, directly explain it. So I thought that worked really well.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. That makes sense. Shit.
Anything else for
Um,
Abroa?
anything else for Abaroa? I don't think so. Oh, one thing that Star Wars that this book really uses, and I meant to mention this in the X-wing books, is the idea of etheric rudders. Did you notice that he mentioned those a lot as like it's like
No.
a ship part? Um, so I was reading up on this because physics in Star Wars operate, and just generally, it's probably not a good idea to look into the physics of Star Wars because there's no, for example, like there's no relativity when it comes to traveling near or beyond the speed of light or whatever else, or near supermassive objects or whatever else. Um, in the Last Jedi, for example, or in anything Star Wars, you see, for example, if a ship turns off its engines, it stops, even if it's in space. And space itself kind of behaves in a really weird way with how the fighters work. So, one, and I'm not really very knowledgeable about physics, and that might come through. But one idea was basically, and I read a really nice write up of this on Reddit somewhere. I'll try to remember to link it when I put this video live. Or I'll probably do a video of it on my own eventually. That the Star Wars universe, the space has like an ether, like almost like a physical aspect to it. That's why if you are in a fighter and you slow down, that or if you're in a fighter and you turn off your engines, that you eventually slow down, or why you can pull these kind of weird turns without stopping and turning, or why space carries sound. I guess it was initially a theory of real life physics that obviously didn't pan out. And I guess the old West End Games and maybe Timothy Zahn were for a while considering making something like that uh, a more significant part of the canon, but it did kind of largely get dropped later on.
Yeah, they actually, if you read Riptide and Crosscurrent, you find out that space is actually just full of midichlorians, and that's what they're. That's I 100% made that up.
Well, I mean, the idea with like the ether is that it's like basically a force, or like it like it basically connects the whole, like all of space and all of the universe. So it would kind of play into that idea. But yeah, ultimately, obviously, Star Wars didn't go that way, and it's probably better that you don't over-examine that sort of stuff, because it's too. Like, it's just, you don't need, like, I don't want them to talk about why you hear sound in space. I don't like, sometimes they talk about how, like, there's sound reproducers in the ship or whatever. Just, like, ignore it.
Yeah. And that's kind of the same idea, the flip side of what I'm talking about with some of Thrawn's stretches. Like, I don't even necessarily have a problem with him doing the stuff.
Yeah.
It's just then they explain it in,
And then you have to really think about it.
and then the explanation falls flat, and it turns into a just it, it's ultimately a series about space wizards.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with being told that these are things that can happen and these are things that do happen.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they try to ground it too much, like that Star Wars is science fantasy or space fantasy, space opera rather than science fiction. So it's really not in its wheelhouse when it goes and tries to do those things. Like there are some science fiction, more traditional science fiction authors that write Star Wars books and they handle it really well. And we got, I think a bit of that did show up with like medical tech in MedStar, but on the whole, I think Star Wars doesn't do well when explaining itself too much.
I agree. I guess it's like, you get some of that with like Black Fleet Crisis, if I remember correctly, is really science heavy, and some of it just kind of falls flat.
Yeah. Yeah. That
I don't hate Black Fleet Crisis. You really don't like it, do you?
I don't enjoy it. I don't hate it. I just don't enjoy it.
As sort of an example of, because I guess the way you're explaining Thrawn might seem abstract to people, but I think what your point is, if you, like when you over-explain something, then you bring too much of the logic in, and the logic is pretty easily like waved away. Like as an example, when it comes to like sound, like I talked about the sound reproducers, then how come every time a ship is disabled or someone's floating in space, they still hear sound? It's like when you start to bring the logic in, you open it too far for I guess you expose kind of the issues with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna find the quote if I can. For when they're transferring, because that's the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet that just always is stupid to me. When they're doing the transfer for Kashyyyk, and I'm going to find the exact.
It's a long quote. It's really dumb.
I just want to find the exact place where I start having a problem.
It's honestly like a logic game. Like it reminded me of studying for the LSAT, like where it's like George needs to sit next to Carly, but Carly doesn't want to sit in the middle. It's like,
yeah. So they're leaving the kiln. This is jumping ahead quite a bit, but it's within the same theme of what we're talking about. So I think it's probably better to bring it up now. But they're leaving the kiln where they've just met with Lando. Leia, they've started to understand the kind of threat that Leia's under and that they're going after Leia. So they're deciding to split up, and they're trying to do it in a way that Thrawn won't be able to, or they don't know who Thrawn is, but that the Empire won't be able to track or expect as much. So they have two ships, Lady Luck and Millennium Falcon. They have Lando, Han, Leia, 3PO, Chewie. And where's my ebooks folder? Because I'm going to search in that. But The plan that they end up coming up with is that uh, Han and Lando are going to take the Millennium Falcon, and they're going to go. They end up going to a Bright Array, trying to track down a slicer that they can use to kind of hide Leia better and still hack into New Republic diplomatic transmissions, so that she can stay tuned in to what's going on in the galaxy, but still be hidden and safe without anyone knowing where she is.
Which they
And
should
this is
have
a
been able
good
to get some sort of certificate from the New Republic. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, then whoever gave them the certificate is going to be in on the play. Basically, they want to keep this as quiet as possible.
Yeah. No, it does make sense, but sort of.
I don't have an EPUB reader anymore. That sucks.
Winter could have probably done this, but
But Leia is going to go to Kashyyyk, and she's going to go with Chewie.
yeah,
3PO is going with
Lando
Han
and
and Lando.
Yeah,
And they kind of program her.
C3PO to sound like Leia,
they program C3PO to sound like her.
Mhm.
So 3PO is able to impersonate her really well.
He basically
And
uses
so far,
what's it called again? When they do those fakes. What are they
deep
called?
fake?
Yeah, it's like a deep fake Leia voice.
It's actually just a Leia soundboard.
Yeah, one of those old Ventrilo harassment videos.
We got a transmission from Leia, but she just kept asking if I'm a little short for a stormtrooper.
And all she's saying is, "Who is your daddy, and what does he do?" There's a lot of Arnold soundboards. I don't know. It's not a tumor.
Told me to get to the chopper.
I lied, but did you find the exact quote where you lose it?
No, and I was very impressed with my ability to fill that time until this point, and it's all just falling apart.
What was I gonna say? I had something to add, but I mean, it is kind of interesting. This book, I guess one thing I really don't like about some books, TV shows, etc., is like when one character is pulling like some sort of clear like ruse, and the other character spends like half of their arc like messing around with that ruse. Like if it had spent a ton of time with the Imperials chasing Leia somewhere she didn't existed, I would have found that tiresome. And in this book, it's just like they spend like probably 10 pages just like getting C3PO set up, and then Thrawn's just like, nah. I don't think so, bitch.
Yeah, I like what happened with that because it was as much to fool the New Republic as Thrawn.
Yeah.
And it didn't work on Thrawn. It was a good way to show that like Thrawn is beyond their little tricks.
Yeah.
But it still gets the job done with what the main hero trio.
Mm. Yeah, I mean,
so I wasn't
works the
able
other
to
way
actually
too,
open
though.
the ebook is the problem right now, Ghostfish.
Okay.
I'm looking for the
I'll see
page number
I'll
in
see
the
if I can get
actual
it
book.
online. But I mean, it kind of works the other way too. Like people, like there's not a lot of BS. Like it's honestly just like who does whatever they're doing better, because like it's similar with the same thing when they get to Mercury.
Okay, I found it.
Okay, you found it. All right, let's hear it.
Consider the possibilities, Thrawn said, leaning back in his chair. 3 people start aboard the Millennium Falcon, 1 aboard the Lady Luck. 3 people then... So, first off, he can't be sure of that.
Yeah.
3 people then transferred, but neither Solo nor Calrissian is the type to turn his ship over to the dubious command of a computer or droid. Mm-hmm. So each ship must end up with at least 1 person aboard. But we also hear multiple times in this book, how Lando slave rigs everything.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
So Thrawn starts off with like so many wrong assumptions, and even up to that point, though, whatever.
You know what it reminds me of though? That the like logic game where it's like you've got a goat and a tiger and a fisherman. You've got to get them all across the river, but you can't leave the goat and the tiger together. You can't leave them. It's just like that.
And he times how long it takes for them to transfer, and it's like 4.5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And he's basing so much of this on those assumptions and how long they're tethered together.
Yeah.
And Like, if he had just said, "Patience, Captain," as you say, the question now is the final makeup of the cruise. Fortunately, once we know that there were 3 transfers, which he couldn't know, just leave that part out.
Yeah.
There are only 2 possible combinations: either Solo and Organa Solo are together aboard the Lady Luck, or else Organa Solo and the Wookiee are there. Unless one of the transfers was a droid, unlikely historically. Solo's
Yeah,
never
that's
liked
the
droids
one.
nor allowed
That's
them
the
to
one
travel
that
aboard his ship.
really I didn't like. Solo's got droid. Like when it comes to Han Solo would do whatever needed to protect his wife. Travel with
Yeah,
the droid, like you can shut a droid off.
like this is a scene that is pure addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
We get rid of a few lines and it works. But because they went into such depth to explain the nonsense that is contradicted even within the book to try to make Thrawn just look omnipotent and omniscient, it just cheapens him as a character, and it's hard for me to get past that.
Yeah.
This bothers me so much.
Yeah, and this is something that they, like you said, Thrawn really improves in like where his like abilities come from. Like they become much more grounded even in canon. But someone in the chat said it's kind of like Thrawn's the kind of guy who does the math wrong but gets the answer right. He only gets half points. But yeah.
But it I like to compare it to the Buzz Droid thing, because I think that's this point where Eli is even like, how did you know that? Like, I didn't know that, but I made these
But I was right,
assumptions.
wasn't I?
This is the chance I took. This is the assumption I was working off of. And that assumption is usually like he starts out with like his factual basis for what he's doing, which in this book he's doing, but he's wrong about those factual bases.
Yep.
And then he just says stuff that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And that you could literally, like, the fact that Pelion doesn't call him an idiot for thinking some of this stuff is just
He thinks it though.
it.
He's basically like, this dude, like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I'm harping on this stuff, but this is like the 3 parts of the book that I don't like compared to the rest, which I love. So I'm not saying I hate the book. It's just these are things that I think are super simple to fix. The things that I think that Zahn did fix in his writing going forward.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I focus on it so much. But yeah.
I guess we need the Thrawn Trilogy Special Edition
I'd be okay with that.
with more Utini, or not more Utini, more what's the sound that clunky or whatever, that sound that
McClunky?
Yeah, George recently added. I love how people are always like, we need George back, and then George does like just classic George Lucas shit.
Like, George Lucas works really well on a creative team where he has other people that can be like, maybe we don't do that.
Yeah.
But
let's move on though. Oh, one thing actually I do want to note is that they have Thrawn after the end of the first battle. He's drinking ale, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Is it even specified to be Corellian ale? Because we get Corellian ale.
No, it's
but
not
I think
Corellian
only
ale.
Corellia gets ale.
No, it's. I mean, it might just be. I don't know if they actually use the word ale. It's some sort of beer. I'm pretty sure.
What if Thrawn just spent the whole book trashed and we didn't know it?
That's like when Han leaves Leia and like him and Lando go out. I'm like, man, this could go 2 ways. This is like, okay,
Yeah.
Lando and Han might be productive, or they just go to like, I don't know, like Nar Shaddaa and just get shit faced.
Break it away and just get shit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were totally looking for that slicer.
I like to imagine that's like the stuff that happened off screen.
Yeah, the time span that Leia seems to be on Kashyyyk does seem to be a bit longer than we get basically 2 days worth of events for Han and Lando. So there's a lot of days where they weren't doing it. Like,
A lot
we don't
of
know what they
travel
were
time
up to.
though too. This book's
Yeah.
pretty heavy on travel time. But like while they are traveling, like you might as well get messed up, right? Like, you think they were playing Burial Card on the Falcon?
I think they're playing episode 1 pod racing.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good idea, Corey.
Charlie wouldn't know how to play.
Perfect. He doesn't know how to play Burial Card either, so it's fine. Let's move on though. Let's talk about Coruscant, shall we?
we should. This is one of the things from the EU that did get picked up for.
Yeah, it's like it. There are other examples, but this is like the thing. It's a pretty major thing
Yeah.
too. We talked about this before, but Coruscant itself is like as a concept, it wasn't invented by Zahn. Basically, comes from early ideas for Return of the Jedi. But the name, this is the fact that they brought the name into the movies is pretty unreal, I think. Um, but yeah, so Coruscant, and like in Dark Empire 1, they call it Imperial Center, I think. They have like the same idea for a planet, but I guess they would have been separate at the time.
Yeah, it's kind of like Imperial Center is kind of like the whole Bastion
Yeah,
Sartananian thing where
yeah, exactly. And then of course, yeah, later books use them interchangeably, but kind of interesting. But yeah, we get Coruscant. It's a little less like it's still a planet-wide city, but it's a little less extreme. Like to me, I didn't get the idea that it's supposed to be like thousands
60 tiers of
yeah. And like there's like the Minari Mountains are described much like
yeah.
I read something that Zahn kind of imagined that the planet still had a bit of wildlife on it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the version of Coruscant that we hear about with like the polar ice cap skiing
Yes.
that they go on, as opposed to
Is that
like
it? Yeah. Is that Han and what's his name that does that?
I thought it was a family trip with Han and Leia, but I haven't read that in so long. That
I can't remember. I'm kind of curious now. Isn't that Han and Kip Duran? I thought that went skiing.
maybe I forgot about that whole. Yeah,
Because isn't that right when Kip comes to Coruscant for the first time? He's been like,
yeah,
yeah.
You're right.
Thank you. I'm just joking.
It was bound to happen eventually.
Yeah, I've been waiting. So Luke sees Obi-Wan for the last time, and I took a note that Ben says that he loved Luke like a son. He's like a brother, a son, and a student. I loved you like all those, and I'm just like, boy, you know him for that long. You're kind of just watching him for most of his life, like running into him at the grocery store. It's like, oh hey,
Yeah, well-
hey Ben Kenobi, and he's just like crying. He's like, God damn it.
We don't know how often they had some force interactions. Maybe like once a week, Obi-Wan would just show up, and because it seems like Yoda and Obi-Wan were hanging out a lot. We don't know.
Yeah, they were Skyping.
In the Lego Star Wars Adventures Yoda Chronicle stuff, you get the scenes of like Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, where they just treat
yeah.
Qui-Gon like complete trash.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you want to? So what do you think about the setup of like the New Republic moving to Coruscant? I think that's a cool idea. Like they set up literally right in the Imperial Palace.
Yeah, I think it works later when we get like more about the old Republic and kind of like reclaiming symbols.
Yeah.
But with this, there is kind of that reclamation thing, but it just seems weird that they wouldn't, because Luke mentions how he's like very clear with them that this is bad. This is a bad idea, and it'll be fine, and it'll be fine. But I do like the whole repurposing of those symbols, reclaiming all that stuff. But I do think if you have the only Jedi in the galaxy that you're aware of saying, maybe don't do this, you maybe don't do this.
But he's like, don't do this, but I can't explain why. But I do like later, they kind of deal with that later on too. Like in Fate of the Jedi, Luke is like, nah, we're gone. And he just like moves the Jedi Order off course. And he's like, nah, screw this planet, dog. All the Jedi leave. But
you know that planet with all the dark side temples? I'm going there and taking all your children with me.
I do like how Plagueis talks about that a lot too, and how like how Coruscant's basically like a shithole and like nothing important should be there. It's just like for Coruscant, it's like I forget what to talk, but it's basically like politicians. If they're on Coruscant, they eventually find their way in the Undercity, and like nasty stuff starts happening to them, and like they start taking bribes and stuff. The Jedi, there's like lingering dark side power and shit.
Yeah, Coruscant is basically like the tourist districts in cities where it's
Mhm.
like it's so much trash just with a slight coat of paint over it to make it
Yeah,
look semi appealing.
yeah.
As someone from Niagara, that's the analogy I go for.
Oh, so like the Jedi Temple would be like that like wax museum that's there.
Yeah, between the Jedi Temple and the Senate, like whatever that the way of whatever with all the
Hmm.
sculptures, I forget what it's called. I should
Hmm.
know that. But
I don't want to have to
that is
pay
the good
visitors
area.
tax. Yeah,
But yeah, see, you know that.
yeah.
That's
I knew it. I did not pay it. They tried to get me. I went to like I don't know if it's no like a Jack Astor's or something, and they were like, okay, we got.
mhm.
Looked at
It
the
was
bill and
probably
I
the
was like,
Boston Pizza on Clifton Hill.
no, I'm not paying this extra. It's literally 20% tax. Or it was Eastside. No, Eastside Marys. You guys have Eastside Marys out there? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was Eastside
there's
Marys.
one in my uh my dad's uncle actually used to own that wax museum. It was weird.
Wow.
There's- So there, yeah. So like, there's the one street in Niagara Falls, Ontario, that's nice and that's
Hmm.
presented to tourists. The rest of the city is just drugs.
Man, I got one of the drunkest I've been in my entire life at Niagara Falls.
That's standard.
But it was a funny situation. And if you guys are gonna be subscribed to this podcast, you got to be ready for tangents and stuff. But it was when I was working as a lawyer in Ontario. There was like a big government lawyers summit, and I don't know if I told you the story before, maybe, but it was the night of the U.S. election where Donald Trump won.
Right.
And when things started kind of going the way they went, as you can imagine, Canadian government lawyers in Ontario aren't largely Donald Trump fans. But anyway, either way, the election was just it was entertaining because it wasn't like people expected. So the we were at a hotel and initially it was like they give you 2 drink tickets, but there's a lot of lawyers who don't drink because to be honest, there's a lot of issues with substance abuse in law. So I was just racking up drink tickets. I had probably 8 drink tickets by the end of the night. And then eventually, when the election started getting real interesting, they brought kegs out, and that night, I just remember. And I woke up the next day. I'm like, oh my god. I just like walk outside. It's like Niagara Falls. Like I missed every meeting I had that morning, like everyone did, and I was just wandering. I was just wandering, just like as hungover as I've ever been in my entire life. And I just found this like Burger King in the middle of a casino and just had one of those like chicken whoppers they had for a while. And it was like one of the worst experiences of my life, but also kind of awesome at the same time.
That sounds like a standard Niagara experience.
Yeah. Yeah,
Even
that's what I
living
was
there.
thinking. I was like, this is kind of what I expect.
It's yeah, it's that street has a lot of bars, but then if you leave that street, everything else is also bars. Like I grew up in a place called Chippewa,
Hmm.
which is kind of like a little village off to the side of Niagara Falls.
Right.
Uh, so it pretty much all residential. There's probably a couple thousand people in that part of town,
Hmm.
but like it very small. But there's an area of about 2 main streets, and there are 13 bars at its peak
Beautiful.
there. You couldn't not. I think it's you leave a bar, you walk for about 500 meters, you're at another bar, no matter
Hmm.
what direction you go in until you get to the river.
Right. And there's people drinking down
And
there too.
well, obviously, those are people
Um,
that are they
what
get their
what
two
what time do
fours
like
from the food
restaurants
land. And
close there and stuff? Is it 2 in the morning?
for the most part,
Yeah. Still, sounds greasy. It does sound like
it's
Argyle
pretty
Street in
greasy.
Halifax, Laser. Yeah.
But yeah, Star Wars.
Yeah.
Coruscant is Niagara Falls confirmed. That's basically what we're going for there.
Um. Yeah. I'm okay with that. It's like if Niagara Falls was like a bit denser. I do kind of like how Coruscant is like the New Republic has a real like base though. You know what I mean? Like Coruscant's kind
Yeah,
of like home. Like if like you're leaving somewhere, you're going to Coruscant. Like,
yeah,
that's where they operate out of. That's where all the politics is. It's a nice kind of central location that kind of, especially where like if you think about it, the original trilogy doesn't really have many planets that you can like rely on for like a setting. Yeah, he goes to Dagobah, and sometimes you go to Hoth or Tatooine. I guess they go to Tatooine in this book, or wherever else, but or Endor. They go in book 2, I think. But
Yeah, there's no regular planets in the movies
Exactly.
until the prequels.
yeah, so Zahn had to invent a planet that we would, not just, you read something like a Broa sky and you're like, what the hell is that? But he made like a memorable planet that, like, I don't know, he does a good job of making it seem like their home, I guess.
Yeah, and it kind of plays into what we were talking about earlier with specifically just being the established power. They're stuck on Coruscant, and
Yeah.
they're kind of tracking the Imperials now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the reason for the use of like the former Imperial facility things, which also is an issue with Delta Source. I can't remember if it had anything to do with the fact that it was taking over Imperial stuff that they originally got it.
There's a Delta Source reference in this book too,
Yeah.
which is
Well,
kind of
that's
funny.
basically how they're getting a lot of the information on
Mhm.
Leia and Akbar.
But they even
and
say something about the
Borsk.
Luke's, like they were nothing like the plants that we had in the Coruscant
Yeah.
on the Imperial Palace, which I thought was funny.
I would have loved if the Delta Source plant turned out to be like a sentient, like Udnar or his species, just sitting still for the whole time.
And
Then
I'm
they
a
find
Jedi
out
Master.
he makes a break for it. That would have
Yeah.
made that scene so much better.
Just like slithers out. Oh shit! It's just like one long plant, just like popping up through a few like little planters. Get out of here! You see him like slither down into the Undercity. um, that's funny.
The Republic has to hire. We get a whole series of a horticulturist trying to track this.
He's big and slimy. We'll find him. This book doesn't really touch on that though. Not until the next one do we get like
Yeah.
we get a bit of, because a lot of this book is people being scared of Thrawn. Like he is like nearly omnipotent, omniscient. So they like, we can't do anything. I can't take a dump without Thrawn knowing. And if I remember when I first read the book as like an adult, I thought it was Winter who, I think it kind of sets it up to make it seem like it's Winter who's passing on a lot of the information. But then you like, nah, it's just the plans and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of the same as the Mara stuff, where you're supposed to think that she's upset at Luke for what happened at Jabba's palace.
Yeah.
But
See, I can't even evaluate that fairly because I've just always known what but yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think I did when I first read the series. Like I think there were a few Vong War books that I read before the Thrawn
Right.
trilogy, but I wasn't really into it yet.
Mm.
So I don't know what the time span was between it. So I think I wasn't aware of what was going on with Mara. So I think I
And then
probably
she's a
did buy
total
into the
freaking
whole.
pain in this book. She's like constantly just pissed. Like this whole book, it's just Mara being just it's just Mara being real negative and unpleasant to be around. I think part of that's
Yeah.
because I listened to the audiobook as well, and Mark Thompson, is just like every time he talks, he's just very sardonic, as Timothy Zahn would say.
She's actually pretty good with everything. Like, there's a lot of her with Luke,
Yeah.
and she has a lot of reasons to hate Luke, which
Mhm.
makes sense. But the scenes that she just has with Card, where he doesn't come up, are like she's usually fairly amicable until Luke gets mentioned or the Emperor gets mentioned, and like part of it is that Card is like intentionally needling her,
Yeah.
trying to like, want to tell me now, want to tell me now,
Yeah.
want to tell me now, want to tell me now, want to tell me now. Hey Mara, who's Luke? Mara, why do you hate Luke? Luke, why does Mara hate you?
I do think sometimes
that's
she
gotta get
didn't-
frustrating.
Yeah, but there's also times where like he says something and she's like, "That's stupid," and like she really doesn't respect the. Not that she doesn't she respects Card, but she's always like aggressively challenging him. I feel like, but that's probably one of the things he likes about her, I imagine.
But it also usually does have to do, the challenging usually does have to do with like the really aggressive challenging is more to do with the rebels.
Mm-hmm.
So anything to do with like where they're keeping Luke, Han, Lando,
Yeah.
and that's the stuff that we care about with the trilogy, because that's the main plot. We don't really need to hear about how she's handling other parts of the organization
Yeah.
in less relevant ways. So I never really had a problem with how she was handled in the series. I think the way she kind of warms up to Luke is really good. I do think part of why it works, though, is that she wasn't intended as a love interest for Luke.
Right. That's one thing I was going to mention, because, I mean, there is a bit of, and well, I'm sure we'll talk about this more by the time we finish, but there's no romance between them, although there's a couple scenes, like, I could see being a Mara Luke shipper after this. There's, like, the scene where they're, like, hiding from the Empire, and she's got, like, the blaster up to his neck, and he's like, I could feel her breathing on my neck, and I was like, ooh, boy. Like, she's like, good thing you're in the...
I could feel her breathing on my neck in a way that Gary will never did.
Good thing you're the little spoon, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And then Han and Luke basically have the same, well, Han's like, so you guys get up to anything in those woods there? He's like, it's pretty shit. Yeah.
Yeah, but Zen didn't intend for them to get together, really. And the fact that he wasn't, like, he made some allusions to that or just jokes about it, but that ends up making it work long term in a way that if it had been like set up like this is going to be Luke's eventual girlfriend / wife,
yeah,
that we probably would have ended up in maybe more of a gross Callista situation.
Yeah,
but
because it would have had the weird Bantam books trying to deal with it. So we get Luke, and so we get Mara and Lando together.
Yeah, like we get enough of progression in there that was fuck. We get enough of progression in their relationship that it makes sense from where they're coming from.
Yeah,
but we don't get those same strange leaps that we may have if it was set up as like this is where it's supposed to be going long term.
Yeah,
so
like
I really did like how that was handled.
Like, yeah, it's a mess. Luke's been hurt too many times by this point. Well, I guess it's only really been Gariel and Lumaya, really. Or what other love interests has he had?
Gariel,
Shira, Bree.
Lumaya.
Yeah, and the the name of the
Leia. Can't forget Leia.
Yeah, there's that Zeltron in the old Marvel comics.
Right.
I can't remember her name. Dani, I think. She's cute. He missed out with her. Zeltron are best species.
But I think the only one that we're really missing up to this point is just Callista.
Yeah.
Because she's much later. But...
Well, and what's her name? The one from what's her name? I'm trying to remember the name of the character. Remember when Luke tries to go find his mother and he goes off with what was her name again?
Oh, is this Black Fleet Crisis?
Yeah. What's her name again? Because Luke, after in Fate of the Jedi, after Mara's dead, he almost kind of gets back together with her in a way. I guess Tenennial too, in a way. Oh, Akana, because I remember she's Falanazi.
Yeah, Tenennial Joe does get kind of just within the one book, but
yeah. But then, like, after Mara dies and Abeloth is inside Akana's body, I'm pretty sure it's Akana she takes over. Luke's like considering it. He's like,
only if Abeloth is still controlling her, though.
Doesn't he have a love interest in Dark Empire as well?
And it's Jay's brand.
Like, I like my girls curvy. All curves.
I haven't looked at anything Dark Empire for a long time, any of the actual stuff, so I don't know.
All right. I can't remember. I thought there was like a Jedi, but isn't it? I can't remember.
Kreia?
Yeah, that's the one. Anyway, so I forget what we're generally talking about other than this bullshit. You know, it's actually kind of interesting. Well, I got an idea. Since we've been talking about like some of the past works, another interesting thing at this point, Luke is really angsty. and he's kind of like really nervous more than anything, anxious more than angsty
Yeah, I actually
about.
really liked his characterization in the books because it's like he's still Luke, but he's also like kind of meek and isn't
Yeah.
really sure what he's going to be doing.
Hmm. Yeah, and he's worried about training people because he's really worried about like making a next Vader.
Yeah, and he's also out of
Gem, yes,
universe. We
sorry.
know, but by this point that he's gotten every person he's tried to train killed
Yeah.
or abandoned by
I think
them.
it's a real goddamn shame
Uh,
we don't get a single reference to Deb Sabuara in this, even though it was written before, whatever.
no, but the book takes place after it, so they could mention him.
Right, because I forgot all the literature is actually handed down by God, who has a.
Yeah, if anything happens in universe after something else, then it's just naturally assumed that it was all known and planned and
Mm,
actually written beforehand, so it could still
hmm.
be referenced.
Yeah.
There's actually a few things I wanted to talk about with like X-wing that kind of play into this, and there's a few instances with it, but
Okay.
the first one comes up, I'd say around here, but we're jumping around a bit anyways.
All right.
But when they're talking about protecting Leia, uh, and it's something about getting, I think it's Rogue Squadron as an escort.
Yep.
Yeah, we had them 4 days ago. It didn't do us a lot of good. Commander Antilles and Rogue Squadron are fighting a space battle.
Yeah. Yeah.
This kind of stuff isn't exactly their area of expertise. We
Uh,
do better with Lieutenant Page and some of the commandos.
yeah.
So definite moment for Wraith Squadron to shine, but of
And
course that hasn't been thought of yet.
Page is in a couple of the Page's Commandos are in a couple of the books as well.
Yeah. Uh, but this is like a if you want Rogue Squadron but more commando-y,
Definitely
we
Wraith Squadron.
we do
Yes.
have the perfect product for you using
Comes with a
checkout
giant
code.
horse as well. That's epic.
But there's a few places in here where it's like stuff that Rogue Squadron or like the X-wing books definitely took inspiration from
Hmm.
that I thought was really cool. Like reading in retrospect, having
Hmm.
just covered those books,
Share with me.
especially with the Battle of Suizfan, we get the interaction between what's that?
Oh yeah,
Arcus. I forget his. Yeah, I think I have a typo here that's screwing me up.
angry New
But
Republic officer #1.
yeah, and we're talking like we get a couple pages worth of Wedge being like uh, arguing with that guy, and he's like, "Oh, I'd be upset too if I had a bunch of these uh, fighter jockeys sitting
Yeah,
on my ship." And it's like this is clearly involved in the planning for, or clearly came out in the X-wing stuff, and it's like getting a little X-wing book
yeah.
vignette in the middle or towards the end of the book, and I loved it.
We even get the bit
That
with
was
Wedge, where he's like, I'm wishing I had taken all those promotions that I had been offered."
yeah.
We get that in Wraith Squadron #1 Wraith Squadron quite a bit. It's like the bet with Akbar. um, so yeah, you're right. A nice little vignette there. Who would Rogue 5 have been? Because I think that's the one. Um, I'm pretty sure the comics. I'm not 1,000% sure on this, but I think the comics, the Thrawn comics, came out significantly later,
Yeah.
and I think they work with Rogue Squadron a bit to give them like more I think they draw characters like within the lore, if that makes sense.
Apparently, by this time, it would have been Rosati
Okay.
or Iniri.
Wait, aren't they dead?
No, Iniri isn't dead. Lujane's dead.
Oh right, yeah. Okay.
Wrong Forge.
Yes, Forge sisters.
Because Iniri was alive forever.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think Rosati ever died.
For me, like once we get past the X-wing series, the pilots, besides for like Corrin, um, yeah, basically lose them.
Hmm. There's a cutoff point for Rogue Squadron where I think after 9 ABY, no one's allowed to die.
Yeah, they're too epic.
So
I think like Tycho, for example, is brought into the comic, but I can't remember correctly. Maybe I'm just seeing someone with blonde hair.
there's only one person with blonde hair in Star Wars, so it's okay. That's just Tycho.
Not Luke.
Who's Luke?
He's a clone of a Jedi Knight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is he that guy that like races those things in that other movie? The one with the double bladed thing?
Oh no, you're thinking of Sebulba.
Okay. Right, right.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that cleared out.
Yeah.
If you have any more questions, feel free to ask.
Okay. So what exactly is a Jedi?
All right, let's move on. I can't. This is some basic stuff. I can't. I can't go to your level right now.
What did you think about Angry Thrawn?
um,
So we get a couple instances of it, but the main instance is
it just
uh, when Luke
destroys that.
is yeah, when Luke is fleeing or leaving Killen, or he's going to Joe Mark because Sabayoth has spoken to
Oh
him
yeah,
during the assault on Killen. This
yeah,
is where Thrawn is getting all the mole miners that he's going to use to attack Sluisfan and capture ships.
yep,
Sabayoth, who's kind of cooperating with Thrawn, and we haven't really talked about him. We should probably
yeah,
do that. But Sabayoth is calling out to Luke, saying to come see him. Luke finds out he's going to Joe Mark. Thrawn kind of jumps to Joe Mark and jumps back to intercept Luke.
yeah.
And Luke gets caught up by them,
Mm-hmm.
ends up getting caught in their tractor beam, but using some creative proton torpedo
It's pretty
madness.
cool. It actually made
Yeah.
sense to me. Basically, like
Yeah, I liked it.
the computer like follows the computer, which the tractor beam uses, follows the ship. He basically puts on the brakes and then fires a missile at the same time. So the computer briefly loses lock on then thinking that he's the torpedoes. It follows the torpedoes and he can fly away.
Yeah, and there's so much that's done that I loved about this scene, like the creative use of all that stuff. Luke getting away in in that creative way, in a skilled fighter piloty way, and then
The
kind of
interdiction
highlighting
stuff.
the
The interdiction stuff, like
yeah,
the way. Okay, I'm gonna say the way the way Zahn handles hyperspace in this trilogy has never been done nearly as well in any other thing. Um, like the way he talks about it being generally not very precise, but like the idea of like using interdictors to pull ships out. I mean, we do get that a bit actually in Wedge's Gamble, but not
yeah.
nearly to the same extent. But the way he just like all of that stuff works, I don't know how much of that was present in the West End game stuff, but he just absolutely nails it. I don't think anyone has ever done it as well.
hmm But
Yeah.
the stuff it sets up with the problems with the Empire are really good too.
Mm-hmm.
Where what Luke did was like really creative, and it probably should have worked. But
Yeah.
then we get the scene with Thrawn where he's clearly miffed and
Yeah.
talks to the guy who's responsible, and you're like, okay, so once this happened, what did you do? What was your solution? And the guy's
Yeah.
like, I just did what the computer said to do. And it's like clearly they're not prepared for this situation. They're not properly trained anymore. We get a lot more of what Pellion was talking about with the Empire's discipline, and their best officers are gone. Their best everything is gone.
Yeah.
And now they're stuck with just whatever they can churn out.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that here where it's like, okay, but what did you try to do to solve the problem? And the answer was basically nothing.
Yeah.
So Thrawn calls over the guy who trained him and is like, okay, so what's the deal with this?
Was he prepared for it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so
He's just like finding the weak link, essentially.
yeah, he's like, what was involved in this person's training? What did you do to prepare them for thinking on their feet? What did you do to prepare them for any of this? And the guy's like, well, I showed him the training video about. It's basically like your first week at a fast food restaurant where
And,
you
like,
get those training
bomb
videos,
threat
and that's
comes
all
in.
he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but so, what did you think about Thrawn's solution here being
I didn't agree.
to kill? So what I thought is that he would kill the guy who did the training.
Yeah, and that's actually what I remembered happening too.
Yeah, me too.
I was like, okay, because I thought that the idea was that he's a perfectly competent, like he's not an officer. I guess he's an enlisted. He's perfectly competent. He's also conscripted too, because they're very they're very low on people at this point, which I want to talk about in a second. He did technically get some training on it, but it's just I don't think anyone really needed to die because I don't think anyone really did their job incorrectly. But if anybody, I don't think it should have. I think it should have been the officer in command because I don't think the guy was. I don't think it was a mistake because Thrawn's like there's a difference between an error and a mistake, and I don't think that I just think he wasn't prepared. I don't think he had the capacity to deal with that situation.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much uh, the reacquisition of the target, it's the fact that they basically pulled in uh, a proton torpedo where he reacquired something,
Right,
but he
yeah.
didn't really bother to check what he was reacquiring.
Yeah.
He was doing it relatively by the book on that,
Yeah.
and both of them made mistakes, but you could kind of see where the mistakes came from, and I don't think he really should have killed either of them, and I think that kind of
No.
gets back to Thrawn falling into some of the like worst parts of the Empire where they're
Right.
not valuing.
In my opinion, in all of this, Thrawn has like a pretty significant weakness in all three books, and it's the way he treats those under him. He treats Pelion well, and he's open to Pelion, adding or whatever. But when it comes to true subordinates, whether it's the Nogri, or people like Talon Card, or people that he thinks he should have power over, he treats them not necessarily he treats them cruelly sometimes. Like when it comes to the Nogri, for example. And that ultimately leads partly to his death. He doesn't like fully value them, and that's not really something an aspect of his character that's carried over. And I think that's meant to be the major because Thrawn's death is kind of ironic in the end because he's such a student of art and he knows all these cultures. In the end, he dies because he doesn't fully understand, one of the cultures that he works most closely with. So it's kind of ironic in that sense. And that irony in his death is really because, in my opinion, because of this weakness and how he views kind of like lesser beings. And
yeah, and it's kind of at odds with what we get from Thrawn in the future, though, is
Yes.
where it's because if you take the Thrawn trilogy in a vacuum, then it works with how he's portrayed. Like he's portrayed consistently throughout that.
Yeah.
But a lot of what
I know what you
happens
mean.
in Outbound Flight, especially, but also how they talk about him with choices of one, allegiance, Hand of Thrawn.
He kind of wants to
duology.
protect the galaxy, really.
Yeah.
But to me, like when I read this book, I understood that, but I also kind of saw this as being the only time we really see Thrawn. Thrawn's fully tested. Thrawn is like going all out. He's like, sure, in the Outbound Flight, he's got conflict, and in other times he's got conflict. But at this point, it's like he needs to be perfect. You know what I mean? Like he's not preparing something. Like he's on the losing end. He's got basically one chance to make it right. So I kind of, and this is definitely headcanon, but I do kind of use that to explain why he's a bit more intense, why he's like, because really, if with the Emperor dead, Thrawn has got nothing against the New Republic, other than the fact that he thinks the Empire, if we're using all of Thrawn's character, he thinks the Empire is a better structure to protect the galaxy, basically.
Well, he basically thought whatever the established power is what I need to work with to beat the Vong, and I'm going to work with Palpatine to set that up, even if I think he can go to hell for most of the time. But one of the reasons that it kind of sticks out to me is that even Pelion kind of comments on Vader's murderousness as being out of the norm and not a great thing. And then we kind of see the same,
much more restrained, but still pretty bad.
Yeah, like we see Thrawn putting forward those same things a couple times that are clearly the more pernicious aspects of life in the Imperial fleet and the reasons why they're losing when Thrawn is supposed to be this reversal of their fortunes. So I think even within that context, it would have been better if he just hadn't killed him, maybe.
It's kind of interesting too because even
fire him, maybe. Like
even the best version of Thrawn is an authoritarian, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like even good
Well, he's
Thrawn
usually
is
portrayed as a compassionate authoritarian, like
right.
very much full of himself and very much has reasons to be full of himself and expect himself to be listened to,
Yeah.
but also uh, more like evil Dumbledore than anything.
Yeah.
I need to stop bringing out Harry Potter. I'm sorry,
I'm trying to think of
but
like honestly, he's almost like good Palpatine in a way, like because people say that Palpatine, like there's everyone online actually Palpatine is just making these Death Stars to fight the Yuuzhan Vong when really that's like there's no basis for that in the lore and it's
he
widely
was testing
contradicted.
it on Alderaan to fight their Yuuzhan.
Right. And like that's contradicted by the lore and there's not really any it's addressed a few times. Palpatine was just evil. Like in a way, Thrawn is almost like perhaps Thrawn's ideal government, galaxy-wide government, looks a lot like the Empire, but for better reasons, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it probably more fell Empire than Palpatine's
Mm-hmm.
Empire,
Right. Which
with
is still
the
pretty
equal
brutal.
proportion of
Like,
Chiss in it.
yeah,
Yeah,
and even the Empire of the Hand. I mean, even the Chiss, like we see with
he's definitely
with
got a
Jag
lot of
and
the.
yeah. I mean, we'll talk about this more when we get to the Swarm War, but yeah, no, I agree. So the characters kind of work, but there's also some like they're it's a retcon. Thrawn's new character is a bit of a retcon. It works
Yeah,
well enough though.
yeah, and we've got a couple questions about that from email, so
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure that there's been some stuff coming up in the chat, and we'll probably talk about that a bit later.
Yeah.
But we should probably jump back and talk about the acquisition and use of our good friend
Jorus.
Jorah Sabaoth.
Sabaoth. One thing I like is that, well, I don't like it, but so for those who don't know, when someone's cloned under, I guess, only with these cloning methods, they pronounce their name differently. So Joris becomes Jorus, and Luke becomes Luke. But it's kind of
actually just from elsewhere.
there's just an accent that they pick up in those Sparty cylinders. Maybe it's because Sparty is kind of like a weird word, and I don't know.
But it does fit in. It's basically playing off the original, and I did a video about this. The original ideas of the Clone Wars as being a war between the clones and the Republic, and there's some stuff that
We'll get more of that later.
Goes into that, but
yeah,
without getting too deep in there,
we get more of that in later books because they do talk a little bit, like they make direct references to the Clone Wars later on.
Yeah,
like the cloners, and I remember the horror of the cloners. That's one quote, right?
Yeah, and Zen is basically trying to explain why that thing would have happened, why that war would have happened.
Yeah, she shouldn't have done.
Which he shouldn't have done, but it was also sort of in line with what everyone thought at the time.
Yes, no one thought it would be. Yeah.
It'd be the same as if George Lucas did make another sequel trilogy, or even if the sequel trilogy we have now was kept in the Legends timeline and clearly everything's different.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they should have known not to do the Yuuzhan Vong War because this is in the middle of the Yuuzhan Vong War. It's like, no, that's not their fault.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So I guess it's just like, because it's not actually their name that changes, just how they pronounce it. Because like when after they meet Sabaoth for the first time, Thrawn to Pelion's basically like, did you hear how he said his name? He said Jorus with the telltale, like, I forget exactly what he says. But then later on...
this clone is from Georgia. The original clearly was not.
Did you hear that twang? Learn your linguistics.
The real Jorah Sabaoth would never have said y'all.
Come back, y'all. Come back now, y'all. You hear? Oh, man, I slaughtered that. But then later on when Wedge is talking about Sabaoth, he also says Jorus rather than Joris. So, like, even though it's like there's rumored reappearance of Jedi Master Jorus Sabaoth, but whatever. I guess not worth looking too deep into it.
Yeah. But yeah, so this clone of Joris...
And Thrawn knows the original Joris, too.
Yeah, he murdered the original Joris, as we find out. But
original Joris almost killed him. So he knew that even the original was pretty feisty.
Yeah. And there's the 5-day trip between Mercure and Wayland right before here, which they're like right next to each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of that doesn't quite work. Also, it talks about at one point Star Destroyers moving at like cruising speed. It would take a day, and I'm like, what? But yeah.
Yeah, and like all this stuff with like striking deep into the heart of the New Republic, going for like
Mm.
the Sluicy areas, and it's like Empire way up
Yeah.
here, Slew event way.
Yeah.
But
Way she goes.
yeah, but the he already has the. I always want to call them the Zalmari Vornskers, but
Yeah.
he has the Zalmari, so he can block the Force. Goes to Wayland with the information he got from Oversky to get Mount Tantus because he wants the cloning technology,
Yeah.
which we don't know yet. He wants the cloaking technology as well, which we do know.
Yeah.
And he wants to acquire the services of Joris. And there was a previous guardian of
yeah, does he
Mount
know
Tantus.
it's Joris there? Is there, like, do we know whether he knew who was actually there? Or does he just think it's okay? He must.
Because it's either that or the previous guardian of the mountain was also force sensitive, and that's who Thrawn wanted.
Well,
but
yeah.
Thrawn was like clearly knowing he needed the Azalmari going here.
Yeah.
And
the
he
interesting
seems to
about
have known.
Joris too is he relies heavily on the battle meditation, and we know from the Outbound Flight because all the Jedi on the Outbound Flight basically have like a ship-wide battle meditation. So he would have known that Joris would have been capable of doing that, and he relies heavily on that throughout. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, do we even know the story of how Sabayoth was cloned?
No,
that's a weird one.
It's all kind of left Mercury until
okay, come on.
Until we get there. Okay, so they're saying in the chat that he didn't know it was Joris specifically, but that's probably correct.
I don't.
I don't think it's like
Star Wars
super
fact file
374
mentioned it on the back page.
He wanted to go to the Dark Jedi discount store and got who he could.
We got to talk about that, by the way.
The Dark Jedi discount store.
Palpatine took blood samples from everyone on the Outbound Flight, Evan says. Interesting. Okay, so I guess that's
we know how he could be cloned. We don't really know.
Yeah, we don't know
what the process was for how he ended up being cloned. Like who actually did it? Because I don't think it was Palpatine. There also does seem to be some.
Yeah.
Or it was probably Palpatine, but we don't know it was Palpatine. I don't think it's ever specifically covered. But either way, he convinces Joris to. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's say that. Let's get your point first, because mine's going to be, I think, probably a longer discussion.
I was just going to keep going with.
I just wanted to talk about the Dark Jedi thing, because Sith don't really exist in this book.
Yeah,
everyone's a Dark Jedi.
The plan that Zahn originally had was that the Sith were the Nogri, right?
Yeah, which would have been
and that Darth Vader was the Lord of the Sith, and that's where that title came from.
I'm so glad that didn't happen.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, it's basically like Darth Vader, Lord of the Nogri. Like, I'm pretty sure that's pretty low on like his level of achievements. Like,
yeah,
he's got some lizards that follow him.
Yeah, it's.
There's a couple of times where like Zahn is like, because like he also wanted Obi-Wan as didn't he also want Obi-Wan to be the bad guy, like instead of Sabayoth, like clone Obi-Wan?
It wouldn't surprise me because we do get Luke and Mara, so that tracks. But yeah.
Wait, there's a Mara?
I thought there was. I might be getting. That might be a cross.
That might be like a three. That might be like a three.
I think I'm just thinking of how Luke kills Joris and Mara kills Luke, so she gets to get off on her "I need to murder Luke Skywalker" thing. I guess we can stop the podcast there because I just literally ended the series, right?
Away she goes.
All right, so we'll be back talking.
Well, what happens to that Thrawn guy? We don't know what happens to him, so let's continue.
No, you already mentioned that Rook stabs him.
No, I didn't.
So you did. You said Thrawn dies. You ruined it.
Yeah, I did. You're right. Let's just. I'll scrub this out later. Let's continue.
All right, so we're really not sure where it's going to go from here, but I do think that that Mara's involved in some way. But
But yeah, what do you think about this like Dark Jedi thing? Are you? I mean, it's kind of because Dark Jedi is something that like as Star Wars has went on, it's like almost totally abandoned. But like it was a pretty common. Dark Jedi were pretty prominent in the old EU.
no, I think it stays pretty
You think
consistent
so?
because we get like the Dark Acolytes during the Clone
Yeah,
Wars. Uh,
I guess it's like
and
Dark Jedi used to be like almost like a category. Ugh, it's hard to explain. Like
well, we have before Rusan, there's like the all the Sith, there every Sith war that
mhm,
always happens.
yeah,
Then you get earlier, and there's like the proto Sith kind of
yeah,
situations. But then after that, when Rule of Two happens, they're just usually referenced as Dark Jedi because they're not part of the Sith Order, and the Sith aren't really taking applications very much.
yeah.
Uh,
But it's
but
almost like Dark Jedi is like a its own thing. Like Dark Jedi is almost held up to be like its own category of Force user. You know what I mean?
yeah,
One,
it kind of is though, because when
yeah,
they're not specifically or they're not specifically learning Sith ways, like just being a Dark Jedi doesn't make you a Sith, and that's kind of like the Dark Acolytes aren't Sith.
yeah,
Well, some of them are sort of Sithy, it's just Sith adjacent.
mm-hmm,
Like Ventress is probably more Sith adjacent than like Sora Bulk is.
mm-hmm,
Uh, but even after Endor, you get most of the Inquisitors are dead, but you get like any residual Inquisitors would probably be Dark Jedi. That's kind of like what happens with Jarek's people. But then you get like the
yeah. The
uh,
Empire
the
Reborn and
Shadow Academy
yeah.
stuff. You get
But then
a
you also
fair
have
amount
like
with like
the
Cedrus.
you have like the one Sith too, and like
You have the True Sith, the One
the True
Sith,
Sith
the
and
Lost Tribe of the Sith, the
yeah.
you have Lomi and uh, other Lomi. Were they from the tribe? I forget
Lomi
where.
Plo? No,
I
she
thought
was a
they were. No,
Jedi.
they were from Shadow Academy, right? Yeah,
Isn't Lomi Plo? I thought she was. I thought she gets termed
she's
in
from
like the
somewhere.
Swarm War.
That's where she comes up most, but she was on the mission to Mercure.
Oh yeah, you're
And they
right.
were said like
Yeah, yeah,
her
yeah.
and
What's
I
his
can never
name?
remember the other one's name, but they were sent to sort of do the same thing and they were working with them.
Yeah,
Pelk, thank you.
Palkia.
But that sounds right.
Yeah.
But there there's little sects of Dark Jedi that come up all the time, and like the idea of like Yoda's Dark Jedi encounter, you have Clone
Mm-hmm.
Joruus. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fairly consistent through everything.
Yoda's Dark Jedi one is weird too. Um, because I got the Bit Fashy Dark Jedi, but there's been like three different Bit Fashy Dark Jedi and two font by Yoda's species. Because there's the Bit Fashy Dark Jedi, who we get references to, especially in this and in
Heir with Cardass.
yeah, exactly. But then there's also a Bit Fashy Dark Jedi who's fought not by Yoda but by Minch or whatever, like the other Yoda like
Yeah.
creature is, which is really weird that there's two Bit Fashy Dark Jedi and they're both on Dagobah. And they're both like associated with the Dagobah cave, but they're completely separate.
Yeah.
Because it's really weird.
And then there was the one earlier that Oteg killed.
Yeah.
And then Master Vandar.
Like the Bit Fashy Dark Jedi that Yoda killed, we know like nothing about. I don't even think it's got a Wikipedia page.
I think he does.
I don't think so. There's Bit Fashy.
One of them does.
I just googled
At
it.
least one of them does.
There's Bit Fashy Dark Jedi Leader. That's the one that that's the one Minch kills in the comics. Then there's Unidentified Bit Fashy Dark Jedi. That's the one from Star Wars Tales. And then there's not the actual one, like the biggest one, which is kind of weird. Oh, I just found when I googled that. Snoke is the Bit Fashy Dark Jedi Minch fought at the Dark Cave.
Snoke?
That was in someone's Reddit post on Star Wars Speculation.
Okay, so apparently I need to clarify the Vandar and Oteg thing was a joke.
Mm.
I'm oh boy. But
People don't know they're Jedi Masters, I guess. I don't like Vandar. He's like...
I actually did a model of him once for uh, a KOTOR era mod for Empire at War.
Hmm.
So I have a special place in my heart for Master Vandar.
Yeah, fair enough. I liked if he went dark side, you could kill. Well, he died in the battle.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest, I enjoyed killing every Jedi Master in KOTOR 2.
They were all pretty.
They're awful, except for
Yeah,
Zez Kyle. I think I remember liking Zez Kyle, but I haven't played it in a while, so
yeah.
uh I may be misremembering him. But the
Um,
guy hiding on in the estate on Dantooine, was that Vrook? I think that's where Vrook was, but he was just awful.
I don't remember, to be honest.
But yeah, so Thrawn is able to coerce Sabaoth into cooperating with him, partially through removal of powers and partially by promising
Hmm.
to give him Luke and Leia as students because he's
And
looking to
and
dominate.
them babies, Jedi
And them
twins.
babies. This is amazing.
He even says that it's like Jedi twins, and he breathes deeply. It's like, ugh, I don't like this guy.
Breathing intensify. But so that's what he thinks is true power.
Yeah.
Thrawn can have his toys, and he's willing to cooperate as long as he eventually gets to play with his little Jedi babies. He's mostly concerned with Leia and the Jedi babies. Thrawn is mostly planning that he's gonna like kill off Luke,
Hmm.
but maybe he'll give him to Sabaoth. Maybe he won't. But
Yeah. Um, what do you think of the Islamari thing, pushing away the Force?
I I think it's interesting, and I think we get enough of it in other places in Star Wars with like the Yuuzhan Vong being outside of the Force and how midichlorians end up working. That it's like within the midichlorian framework, it makes sense as
Yeah,
well
it's
as like just a
it would
biological
never
thing.
happen in like the modern Star Wars canon.
Probably.
It's
Well,
like, I don't know, because it's like the Force is supposed to be this thing that like, like think about how Yoda describes the Force in like Empire.
yeah.
I don't know if you can fit like who would win, a power that permeates everything in the entire universe, or some small scaly boys like.
Yeah, with a lot more modern stuff, it tends to be any
It's much
disconnect
more
from the force is usually
spiritual. Yeah,
psychological or
exactly.
like PTSD, like uh, Cal and stuff. But
Hmm. There's an interesting. I mean, one of my Plagueis does so much really well, which is why this book I don't think will beat it. But or I don't know if any book will beat it. Um, but it talks about like how I did a video on this. It talks about like how the Hutts, for example, or not necessarily the Hutts, but lots of species develop a sort of like they evolve and their midichlorians change basically. So
mhm.
species that are preyed upon by beings that use the Force, or that the midichlorians will adapt, I guess. So
So there's basically like three or four forces, and which force you're using depends on what you're doing.
yeah. Well, there always is kind of like the discussion of like the cosmic force, the living force, but
Hmm. Uh, one thing I guess we kind of got up to the capture of Luke again, where
mm,
Sabaoth was like calling out to him into killing.
yeah,
Because every attempt up till then, that's like Thrawn had been sending out no strike teams,
just doing a
just
terrible job.
failing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happens with the interdictor is also that the interdictor is described not necessarily as a gravity well, but as a gravity beam,
Oh,
which
really?
was
I didn't notice
I don't
that.
think it's ever really described in a
No.
similar way, but it's specifically like a directed gravity beam almost, where they're picking the area that we want to use it on.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
But
I forgot about that. Yeah.
the interdictor was now rotating in the wrong direction. Its gravity beam sweeping across Luke's previous course instead of
Yeah, because
tracking
I
the
was
current.
kind of wondering. That makes sense. I guess I didn't really pick up on that because I was wondering how the direction of the interdictor should matter, because presumably, it would just be. I guess it's a cone, because I always kind of thought of interdictors
Mhm.
being like a circle around the entire ship,
Yeah.
But maybe
The
it's,
reinforcement prevention radius in Empire at War.
yeah, maybe it's like a cone, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what Zahn was going for.
But I think
I
later things have kind of made it
yeah,
more of a like, yeah,
it kind of varies.
yeah,
But there's only like 3 in the galaxy, as we learned from X-Wing,
yeah,
so it's hard to really know.
yeah. That's true. But yeah, I guess the story people are saying goes with the cone. See, I didn't even pick up on that because I was just like my assumptions. I was just like,
Mhm.
oh, one thing I wanted to mention. I just randomly thought about this. It's interesting how these books change with time. In this book, people have like a communicator on them. Usually, like Han's got his like just his thing on him, like
His pager.
comm link on him. It's basically like a pager. Later on, like as cell phones rose to prominence in the real world, if you read like not New Jedi, or if you read like Fate of the Jedi or Legacy of the Force, they always have their data pads, which are essentially cell phones. They've got like games and stuff on them.
I've got one.
Yeah, I got one too. So it's just kind of funny. Oh, I get it. Your name. It's just kind of funny how like
There's just so much disappointment in your voice when you said that.
yeah. It's just interesting how like people are using cell phones in real life. We'll give the characters cell phones. People are using
Yeah.
pagers. They got pagers.
There was one point in Fate of the Jedi where I think Luke was asking, or Ben was asking Vestera for her WhatsApp.
Yeah, I remember that. He was asking her for her Snapchat. No, there's one point literally where like Ben is waiting like in a cupboard or whatever. He's hiding from something, and he loads games on his data pad.
Yeah.
It's like, I've got my holo games.
Luke probably would have liked that when he was just sitting in space after
Damn,
this.
I'm so bored. Yeah, yeah. That's like Luke like willingly leaves the Falcon and fly back to Coruscant. Well, yeah, fly back to Coruscant on his X-wing. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you ever?
Well, he does
I know he's
trances
the
for most of his
hibernation or
traveling.
the trancing,
So
but I'd rather still go to a trance on a bed. Like,
yeah, well, that would be if he was on the Millennium Falcon, he would have been expected to stay awake the
that's
whole
true.
time. It's like, okay, well, Han and Lando, this has been fun.
Han's like, hey, come on, check out this YouTube video, and Luke's like, it's 10 minutes long. He goes over there. It's like, oh my god.
See you guys later.
Luke's in his Jedi trance, wakes up with a bunch of space sticks on his face, like marked like in marker. God, yeah.
And he does abandon R2 for a while because R2 doesn't shut down, but
Yeah.
but he gets picked up by Card because Mara tells him where to go.
Yeah.
So we get her Force affinity a little bit.
We also get a weird part early on when they put him in the shed, and I guess I kind of figured it out later, but she's like, it would even be believable that someone who had never handled a lightsaber could kill Luke. And I was like, what? What do you mean never handled a lightsaber? Like, but then I was like, oh, she's just kind of thinking from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah. She hasn't seen the cover of Choices 1 yet. I think that's Choices 1.
Yeah, where she's in front of the Star Destroyer.
Yeah, holding her,
Super,
very clearly holding her lightsaber.
super goofy image, but then yeah, like later when she actually uses the lightsaber, she's perfectly good with it.
Yeah. She's just like sitting there while he's knocked out too. And
Yeah.
you're not sure how long she's been sitting there, but well, I guess Luke gets picked up by Card. Card's like, we're going to decide what we're going to do with you.
Yeah.
We might hand you over to the Empire. Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
Mara probably wants to kill you, so be careful for him. While he's doing that, he's got his Alamari around so Luke can't sense it, and someone just walks up behind him and smacks him with a candlestick is what I pictured. But he wakes up. He's like, oh, they're not going to expect how fast I heal. It's like 3 days later already.
I love
Mara's
Card
sitting
though.
right there.
Card's like the best character.
Oh. Card is great, except for that picture where is it Michael Stackpole, Timothy Zahn, and Shannon McRandall as Talon, Corrin, and Mara. Like, Shannon as Mara is like what everyone that's her. So that works.
Yeah.
Zahn actually does work as Card, but then you get Michael Stackpole as Corrin. It's like, no.
This isn't a dude that's force running and force jumping. Yeah. Man, he's gonna listen to this podcast. He's gonna be so fucking pissed.
It's not an insult. He just doesn't look like Corin.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I really like their base on. Also, if you have you ever listened to the audiobooks, Corey?
For these, no.
Yeah, you should because they're really good. But they got like full music, full sound effects. Mark Thompson's all like his voices are all really good. Like his Lando is actually almost perfect. His Han is good. His Luke is whiny but good. His Mara is just like she's just totally nasty the whole time. And his Talon card is just like perfect. It's very like it's like accented, but I don't know what accent it is supposed to be. But he's like very smooth talking. It's almost like Italian maybe. I don't know, but it's really good.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to listen to that, is there any like service I could use to
You could
to
listen to
download
it on
listen to audio?
Audible.
But what if I wanted to type something in when I was doing my checkout? Is there anything that I
We
could
do
type
need
in
to
while
get
I'm
an
doing that?
Audible for us. Do you have one?
I do not. I do not.
Well,
I don't.
you can if you do want to listen to a free audiobook. I wasn't planning on promoting my own thing, but you can do audibletrial.com/my name Eckhart's Ladder and you get a free book. Someone was asking too because I love the audiobooks. Like I don't get that much time to read. So like, but I do drive around a lot. Like sometimes when Gus falls asleep or whatever, like if he's being cranky, I'll just take him for a drive and he falls asleep. And a lot of the Star Wars books, I've talked about this before, but a lot of them are really heavily abridged. But these books are there in their entirety. There's older versions where I think Anthony Daniels does the narration, but I highly recommend the 20th anniversary ones. They're phenomenal, and you can get a free one, or some of the Star Wars books are okay. Some of them are really really good. Just look for unabridged, really.
Yeah, the ones that are like an hour and a half, generally not as great.
Well, some are legitimately 2 hours and 45 minutes. Like the X-Wing books are that long. And I mean, it's fun. Like it works for New Jedi Order actually, because there's 19 of them. Like, come on.
Well, when our podcasts sometimes run longer than the audio, that's.
I wouldn't say like they frequently do, but you should listen to if you have time. You should listen to it for Dark Force Rising, Corey. I'm curious to hear what you'd think. Would you think you would have time? It's like 14. Well, yeah, unless you do a lot of driving, it's pretty hard. But
yeah, and like everyone can see where I basically travel from there to here.
Yeah,
I move my camera, which people can't see on the stream. But for anyone who's watching this after the fact, I move about that 5 feet in my day, and occasionally I go out the door to my kitchen.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't do much traveling. So
yeah, all right. You're excused.
I'll try to fit it in, but it may not fit.
Yeah, it's all right. But yeah, abridged. I saw in the chat. Abridged means basically there's portions of the book taken out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works. Sometimes, like Star by Star, the abridgment is just brutal.
They actually cut out where Anakin dies, so just the rest of the series makes no sense.
They cut out every scene with Coruscant in it. So
you actually start off at Merkier.
It's pretty bad. That's surprisingly relevant though, isn't it?
Yeah. When I started that sentence, I didn't realize how relevant it would be.
Yeah.
So there was actually a mention of Zygerian slavers, which I, for some reason, always thought came up with the Clone Wars, but it was referenced here, so that was just a me thing. You're all welcome.
Very good. In this book, because Vornskers later on, they hunt with the Force, right?
Yeah.
Is that mentioned
in
this
sense
book
the
at all?
Force.
Yeah, because that's why the Islamiri have their defense. Is that mentioned in this book at all?
I don't think it's ever explicitly spelled out, but it's definitely it's definitely something that's being established because of Sturm and Drang's reaction to Luke. And I think they mention it as being them initially being hostile towards Mara. But it's definitely something that's established.
Right.
I don't think it's ever explicitly spelled out yet.
I really like their base on Merkur. I don't know why. I like how Card is sad to leave for no reason other than like he's got a really like dope setup there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, and Thrawn even talks about how it's like because of the Zalamari, the Jedi didn't go there because the Jedi didn't
mhm.
go there. Smugglers would go there,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how he knows about it. Uh, and within the broader expanded universe, that's probably Cardass's work,
Mhm.
but Cardass isn't a person yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like Mercure as well.
Just like he's got like just a cool base too. Like it makes sense. He's got like this hangar. He's got like barracks. You know everything that you would. It's like kind of realistic, just like backwater. You know hole for them to hang out in.
Yeah, it seems like it's a decent place other than everything wanting to kill you. It's
I
like
mean, if
a
you don't go in the
forest
woods,
in
it's not so
Australia.
bad, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, anything else with Sabaoth we want to talk about for this? Like he's definitely going to be more of a factor
Yeah. He
in
doesn't do
Dark
much.
Force Rising and Last Command.
The
So
bit of the battle meditation is an interesting idea.
yeah,
Because and one thing I was surprised reading this back, like as a YouTuber trying to think of video topics, is it actually straight up says how effective his battle meditation is when he's distracted, when he's because it's like all the metrics, like performance metrics across the ship are up by 40%, and he's coordinating other task forces, and he's a clone of the actual Jedi Master. So it's just like imagine what Palpatine was doing like on the Death Star.
yeah,
And I like how like Pelion, who's like a 50-year-old veteran of the Navy, like he's like obviously very proud of the Empire. He's like personally offended. Like probably the most angry he gets in the whole book is when Thrawn basically says, "Yeah, you guys were relying on battle meditation. You had no gumption, basically." And then once Palpatine died, you guys were trash. Like you guys were recruits. He says. I thought that was an interesting idea. I mean, it helps kind of explain away how like why did the Imperial fleet just run after the Death Star was destroyed? Why didn't they, fight it out? And kind of like obviously a bit of a retcon, but I think it makes sense.
yeah, yeah. It's also pretty much established. Like it's not that none of you were ever capable of anything. It's just you were so reliant on that you didn't know it that when
Yeah,
it was gone you were lost. So it's
exactly.
not like actually you're all trash. It's just you're
Right.
all decent, but you didn't realize how much you were using this thing. It was a crutch,
Look,
and
he kind of mentions too,
you
like
lost it all
how the
once.
Empire was like totally they lost like their will to keep fighting almost. Like
Hmm.
they're basically in a slump because they just weren't being effective um and yeah, it's just kind of like it's like the Empire's like morale was so low at that point that like once that sort of stimulant was gone, it's like yeah, you
Hmm.
were
Yeah, withdrawal is a good
withdrawal, yeah.
analogy
hmm
for that.
Um,
Um,
and yeah, we get
but
that.
with that, that kind of ties into. Sorry,
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that kind of ties into a lot of the, or it's as good of a segue as I'm going to get without lampshading it more than I'm doing right now. Uh, into how often the original trilogy is kind of referenced in
Yeah,
specific
way too
events,
much.
which is yeah,
Um,
Mos Eisley, like it's like, oh, this reminds me of that time on Mos Eisley. Or like it's like nothing has ever happened in their lives
yeah.
between the original trilogy and now is I think the thing that makes me dislike it as much as like we both had our things
hmm
in X-wing that we'd
Yeah,
harp on, and for you it was the Corellian odds thing. For
yeah,
me, it was Akbar swimming puns,
yeah.
which not quite the same thing as references, but
But I mean, there were
it
also
happens here too.
the like X-wing does it too. Like for example, there's always references to Tatooine. They got
Yeah,
Biggs's cousin and stuff. But like, yeah, this book, there's what four different instances I think where someone says I've got a bad feeling about this. Um,
hmm
there's like scenes where it's like, but I will say, I kind of got like I was thinking about this thing when I was listening to it. Um, it it's not so bad as like episode 7. Not saying episode 7 is a bad movie or anything, but episode 7 is basically a remaster. Well, it's a soft remake of A New Hope. I think everyone knows
yeah.
that. Um,
They've
the,
like JJ has even said like
yeah,
they wanted to
they
start
had to
safe,
get people back
and then
in, which okay, that's fine. I'm not criticizing that necessarily. This doesn't do that because the plot really isn't similar to any Star Wars
mhm.
movie. But what it does do is kind of take those little aspects of the movie and kind of takes them as a way to ground it to the rest of the series instead.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the scene where Luke is talking about how Mara wants to kill him to Han, that really reminded me of a couple of scenes. First, when they're both leaving the Death Star and talking about, like, oh, have you ever met a girl like that? But also at the end of Return of the Jedi, when, or not the end, like the midpoint of Return of the Jedi, when Luke's talking to Leia, and he's like, just trust me or whatever, or like, I can't explain it. He's like, I can't explain to Han why she wants to kill me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think for what it's doing, a lot of those work, but the parts that I don't like are the ones where it's like, where they're like outright referencing what happened before. Because to a certain extent, I forgive it more with the Thrawn trilogy than with other books, because it's like, this is kind of them starting off that universe. Is like, we do need to get people in, but the way he handles the rest of the universe is so good that it's unnecessary for him to do this stuff. Which is kind of what makes it stick out. It's kind of like having an essay with like subheadings when the topic sentences are already there.
Yeah, it's like betraying, like, Tatooine's supposed to be a isolated planet. Every time they go there betrays like Luke's lines in A New Hope, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not as bad as in Darksaber, I think, when they go back to Hoth and Luke kills that Wampa that attacked him. Do you remember that? He kills that Wampa that he cuts off his arm. Like, he cuts off that Wampa's arm, then he goes back and finishes the job.
Luke's just not a good
actually
person.
A thing that happens. Like that's how bad it gets on some occasions.
Yeah.
I think that's in Darksaber, or I can't remember. But either way, like, yeah, this book, like, it borrows a lot, mostly in how the characters interact with each other too. Like, when Leia says, "I'm not a committee," that's like, I rolled my eyes at that so hard. Like, he doesn't need to do that. Like, especially where he pretty much nails the characters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if it was a weaker book,
Yes,
and that was the only stuff that I felt like was tying it into Star Wars, then, but here it's just everything.
it feels
pretty much everything else is done so well.
Yeah.
It's just those stick out. It's the same kind of issue I have with the Deus Ex Thrawn issues, where it's like, there's so much good around it that it's unnecessary, and then it gets added in, and it becomes like, it detracts from the overall.
I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate, though. Part of the reason why it feels so much like Star Wars is perhaps because all the expanded universe is basically based off of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I'm specifically referring to how it feels like the original trilogy when I say that, though. I'm not talking about how it fits within everything else, because the way it does the characters, the way it does the pacing, everything feels like original trilogy. And I think we were talking about how Courtship had so far felt like the most like the original trilogy of everything we've read, and I think this.
This passes that.
The Thrawn trilogy edges it out a little bit. Courtship is probably in the same range as it.
Yeah.
But that's basically what I'm talking about here, where and I think that's actually something that Courtship did better, is it kept that feel, but it wasn't quite so this time when Luke was holding his lightsaber as it opened with a snap hiss, which was another thing I forgot that happens like 80 times in the books. Courtship didn't necessarily rely on that stuff as much. And I think it was better for not having done that. And I think Thrawn Trilogy could have done that as well, and it would have been slightly better.
But again, because of, like, there wasn't a Star Wars expanded universe, you gotta, like, we both, I think, recognize,
yeah, I understand
the very,
why he
very
did it.
hard situation that he was in. Like, I don't think even in his best, I don't think best case scenario for Timothy Zahn before this would have seen this book be so successful.
Yeah, like, I'm not. It's kind of the same thing with the Thrawn stuff I was talking about earlier, where it's like, I'm sort of using his future work and like showing it as a way that he's improved. And like, I understand why he did it, but at the same time, especially when we're going to be ranking it up against other stuff,
it's like the exact
with
opposite
that historical
of
perspective. We can see why these choices were made, and I can understand and accept why those choices were made at the time. but I'm also
You got to be critical if you're
reading it
looking at it thoroughly.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm I'm reading it as someone who is already familiar with all this stuff and can judge it in uh, where it sits now.
Yep.
And I'm not necessarily like I'm not saying it makes me not enjoy the book. It's just these are the things that I think changed in how he wrote for the better.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you gotta look at it, you gotta look at it fairly. Like you can recognize, you can excuse it, but if you're being objectively, then if you're being objective, you still gotta. No, that makes total sense. But it is remarkable how different of a villain Timothy Zahn decided to go with, because at the end of the day, Sabayoth is not the ultimate bad guy in this. It is Thrawn. It's the Thrawn trilogy. It's not the Sabayoth trilogy. And yeah, I just think like it's interesting how, or even like a little bit brave, because it would have been very easy to do the Dark Empire thing and go with whether literally or not Palpatine 2.0.
Well, it kind of was where Palpatine and Thrawn were playing analogous roles, and Sabayoth was Vader, where he's trying to lure Luke over to the dark side, and you get the
Yeah,
exact same
but Thrawn is
dynamic.
fundamentally different than Palpatine.
Yeah, but it's the same sort of. He's going for the same sort of power dynamic of here's the powerful wizard guy who controls everything, or powerful wizard guy who's trying to bring over Luke to be another dark powerful wizard. Then you have the other guy who's in charge of everything, who's in this case not a powerful wizard, but Palpatine's powerful wizardness didn't really play as much into
Yeah, that's fair.
the original trilogy.
That is fair. But the original trilogy also never really gives us like it would have been easy to structure it in the same way too, because the original trilogy doesn't give us the Imperial perspective.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying it's the exact same. It's just it's still trying to recreate some of those power dynamics.
No, I get what you mean.
At the core of it.
No, that makes sense to me. But it could have been so much worse. Even Dark Empire, Dark Empire relies on the same bad guy, but it's the structure of that story is like in that relies on the bad guy, and it also returns things to the Rebels versus Empire thing, because the New Republic is basically the Rebels in that book. They even call themselves the Rebellion, but that book like fundamentally, that comic like is also fundamentally different than the like original trilogy, just how it's structured. Although he does meet like a Yoda like character and stuff, but yeah.
So I guess that kind of just leaves us with Leia's time with the Wookiees, Luke's escape, and Sluis Van.
Let's start with the Wookiees.
Sluis Van.
I love how Kashyyyk is portrayed in this. It's so cool. Like, it's so fantastic and interesting, and nothing I don't think has ever done it justice.
Yeah.
Like, it describes like the tallest trees are like a kilometer taller than like the regular trees. Like it's not just like the Kashyyyk in Revenge of the Sith is the most disappointing shit of all time. It's like they're fighting on like a hill next to the water. Like Kashyyyk's supposed to be like, it's basically a high. It's like a fantasy city. You know what I mean? Like like the Wookiees have like these basic, like they have entire streets on like branches and stuff, and they have like it's just crazy all what he sets up, and he does such a cool job. KOTOR does an okay job, but Kashyyyk is basically like, yeah, Daigo said exactly what I was about to say. It's Tree Coruscant. It's got like the Undercity that probably no one's ever been to the very bottom of, except it's the Shadowlands, and like it's like,
yeah,
basically say shit gets more evil as you go down.
I think KOTOR did about the best it could be done relative to the technological limitations of making a video game at that point. Because it's small areas, but the small areas we got are basically what you'd expect from it.
That's true.
But let's not sleep on the fact that Leia is going here for protection, and the first thing she wants to do is shoot a Wookiee.
Why does she want to? Salporo when he's wrestling with Chewie. Yeah. Let's not make a scene. Let's not make a scene. Oh, it's like it doesn't. It just seems like they're hugging too, and she's like, "Time to execute this mother."
Leia, what are you doing?
Leia has a problem, I think. You can say it's like a little bit of, and it's not misogyny, but it's just like all the women in Star Wars at this point are very emotional. Like Leia cries a lot. Um, like you never have like Luke. If Luke saw Sapporo die, it is Sapporo who dies later on, isn't it? Or is it Salporin? Yeah.
Terrapin.
Is it him that dies later on?
Yeah.
Like yeah, like when Leia sees that, she like starts crying. Like Luke never would have started crying. Um,
Uh, I
I don't
I
know.
don't think
Maybe I'm reading
there.
too much into it. I'm not
That
saying
might be
it's a
more of a
sexist
men
thing
problem
either.
than
I
a
think it's
women
just like,
problem.
yeah, I just think it's like not necessarily like Leia didn't cry when Alderaan got blown up. She is pregnant though.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Uh,
I don't know. She's very. I didn't love Leia in this book to be honest, but
yeah. It's mostly just protect the Leia.
mhm.
Is is most of her involvement,
the precious
and
protect the precious womb,
it gets a
basically.
bit better with
Yeah,
the net with Dark Force Rising, which is when they spend a bit more time on.
yeah,
Or do they go? I think they do go to Honegger
yeah. In the
in
next one,
Dark
yeah,
Force Rising,
yeah.
but uh,
Oh, I love the Nogri too. I think they're super cool. I love the Lady Vader, and then when
yeah,
Han comes, they call him the consort to the Lady Vader, and he's just like, "What the hell?"
there's going to be a lot to unpack with that. I think
Yes.
probably when we get to uh, Last Command, it's probably when we're going to speak more in depth about it. But
At one point,
uh,
they mentioned that it's is it Cabarash? I forget. He's the one that they
Kabarak, yeah,
yeah. It's like he had hair over his eyes. I'm like, where the hell does a Nogri get hair from? Like,
I think it's just really long eyebrows,
yeah, maybe.
just like curtains from his eyebrow.
Yeah.
The Nogri bodyguard, like Kabarak, becomes one of her first.
Yeah, it's
And
Who's the other
Kabarak,
one? And
well, it's Kakmain and Miwal for a
Cacmane and
while,
Meewall. Yeah, they're
and
my favorite.
I think there's one that lasts a really long time, but the rest of them they're just red
I'm
shirts in
pretty
Star
sure
Trek.
Cacmane and Meewall last for quite a while.
Uh, they last for a few books, but their successor, there's it might actually be Kabarak that I'm thinking about, but one ends up with like 3 or 4 partners,
Hmm.
and they just keep getting shot.
Um, yeah, no, I know what you mean. The Nogri was one of my favorite things Bantam did because even like even like I guess they do go into NJO and maybe a little bit further, but oh, I think Jason kills Cacmane and Meewall like when he fires on the Falcon. Remember that? Like, but I did like
Yeah,
how just like always there's like Nogri with them. Like it's like you just kind of love them because they're so cool and like they just are so loyal. They're like small Wookiees basically,
yeah,
and they're always like with the kids or often it's like whenever I think of them, they're like in the gunners of the Falcon for a lot of it. And I remember one of them is killed in like Vector Prime, I think, or at least really early in the Vong War. One of them is,
yeah.
and that's basically like to show that because the Vong aren't to trifle with, which is kind of like isn't it? Don't they call it
Well,
like
they
the
also dropped the
Wharf?
moon on Chewie, so
Yeah, isn't that called like the Wharf? Like because Worf is always killed to like show like this guy is badass because Worf in Star Trek is like such a good fighter and everything, and then
how he loses every fight.
yeah, but
I haven't watched.
he's supposed to be so tough.
Yeah,
Worf affects someone is calling it because yeah, Worf's supposed to be a badass. So when someone comes and beats him up, it's basically like proof that like oh this person's really badass. It's kind of like they do the same with the Nogri in Vector
yeah.
Prime. Um, I think it's Vector Prime. I don't remember the exact book, but early on in the war, and of course
Hmm.
the Chewie thing, which was a big deal. Or Vegeta, yeah, Vegeta's another really good example of that.
Or Vegeta.
Yeah.
So with Leia, she basically gets there. She sees an Ogre like immediately. And and stay
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
It gets Salporin killed,
Yep.
but not
Which is
really
like
much
Chewie's best friend
happening with
too.
that. Yeah. In that attack, they capture Cabrak.
Yeah.
And really anything else that happens with that plot, we're probably going to talk about more
Yeah.
with DFR and
Oh, we've got acronyms now
TLC
or initialisms.
here on TT with C and J.
Very nice. This sounds very clean and official. But yeah, the Nogri are cool. They've got like it's pretty cool how do you think that their history gets a little messed up with the timelines because it's supposed to
Yeah.
be a rebut like with the ships and stuff, but it's not a big deal. It honestly
It's pre-Clone Wars that it ends up
being
working out to, but
yeah.
that's more of a timeline, the years being messed up issue than
Yes. But not a big deal. We haven't really even gotten much of Rook this book. Like I guess one of the first scenes we have Rook kind of scaring Pelion, which is pretty funny.
It's basically Melvar and Zinj, but
yeah,
Rook and Pelion.
basically, yeah. Can you imagine if if Thrawn was completely normal, like exact same as he was now, but just really fat? Like I wish I got to hear the word girth more in the Thrawn trilogy. Is what I'm saying.
As Luke's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, he looks sardonically down at Thrawn's girth.
Sardonically at his girth. That's interesting. I've actually been collecting a whole list of words that. Hold on, let me pull it up. There's like probably 6 words that Zahn says all the time. Some of them don't pop up as much in this book, but I just remember. Let me just. I had a document with this. Okay, admonished. Lots of people are admonished.
And get looked at admonishingly.
Yes. Han gives a lot of injured looks, and other people give injured looks as well. Luke soothes R2, and lots of characters say things. Lots of characters soothe other characters. Sardonically, it says a lot. And the other is warbled, but we don't really get that in this book. I think warbled might be a later Timothy Zahn thing.
Yeah, I think it depends on the proportion of R2 we get.
Yeah, I'm just gonna Google Timothy Zahn sardonically and see what comes up. Timothy Zahn is not worth. Anyone noticed how often Timothy Zahn has his characters swear under their breath? That's true. This is just comments on this Reddit post from 5 years ago. I love how every other line is said sardonically. Yeah. Grimace. Oh, there's lots of grimaces.
And funnily enough, he's actually referencing the McDonald's mascot character.
Which is really surprising.
He was part of Card Smuggler Organization.
Oh, here's one. The familiar snap hiss of a lightsaber. Lip twisted. Yeah, there's like... I'm going to open my ebook and see how many times the word sardonically appears. Just 1 second.
Okay.
We're just playfully making fun of Zahn here because everyone's got their own writing style. So, but shall we move on?
Yeah, I think we've just got the Great Escape and Sluis Van left.
Okay. Do you want to talk anymore? Is there anything about Kashyyyk you wanted to mention? What did you think of the? Because I talked a lot about my thoughts. What about you?
No, I basically just agreed with what you said and think KOTOR did it well. I don't have much else to add other than what you said there.
Yeah, I like the Wookiees are pretty cool. Oh, the audio. What's the name of the like the Wookiee with the lisp? Basically, Raw isn't it Rawrook or something? Oh man, the audiobook is almost unlistenable because of how the narrator does him. He growls for half of it, and it's just, yeah, it's pretty special.
Is there anything you want to say about Han and Lando's meeting with Card and Luke's time with Card before, like, kind of talk about the Izalmari and Dermot Strang stuff with Luke? And we've talked a little bit about Mara's history, but that comes out a bit more in the Escape.
I do like at the end how like despite all of his like scheming and stuff, Kar's just like, yeah, like what am I gonna do? like when it's discovered when Han and them rescue Luke, and Luke's like, so have you made up your decision? He's like, what am I gonna do here? Like I'm screwed.
Luke's suggestion of like, just put me back.
Yeah, I'll just sleep. Just like let me back in.
If you want to abandon me in the middle of space, act like this never happened, I'm okay with it.
Isn't that like exactly what he says?
I will do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt bad for Cars. Like,
yeah, no,
you
he's
do this.
he's like fundamentally a good person. And yeah, he's like he's like the. I don't know if he'd be like. I'm trying to put him on like the alignment chart. He's a good, I think. Like at first he's like a neutral, but
I think he's chaotic good.
You think so? I think that's right. I think because the smuggling is chaos. But he specifically says he doesn't do slavery, he doesn't do stuff like that. So
he might actually be lawful neutral.
I think until book 3, maybe. I think his actions.
Like he does have his code that he stands up to, so I want to say lawful, but lawful good doesn't really work with. Well, lawful good does work with the smuggler stuff because everything he does with smuggling is making.
You meant lawful good. Okay, I always thought you meant lawful neutral. I don't know. I don't know if a smuggler can be. First, I don't know if a smuggler can be lawful though.
Well, lawful doesn't just mean like you follow the laws as written.
It's like
because if you're living within the imperial law and you are,
you're right. He's got a very strong code. So you're right.
And he wants to do the right thing. So he's doing the smuggling, but he's trying to do it according to a code of laws that he has set up himself.
Yeah.
So you could say he started off lawful, evil, even. Yeah. Maybe I wouldn't even say that. Maybe lawful neutral.
He's probably presented as lawful evil because for a bit in this book, anyways. I mean, he replaces Jabba, so like you assume he's going to be, and it's ultimately a criminal syndicate. Because what he's doing is a crime, but it's not like, he's smuggling. Like come on.
Yeah. And he's doing a lot of smuggling in the Empire as well, especially.
Yes.
Which, when you're disobeying the Imperial laws,
And there's also the fact that smuggling is really redundant in the New Republic because they're not charging tariffs anyway.
Yeah.
It's just like no one believes like how good of a situation it is. It's just like, But he's not evil. I can't. Card's not evil, especially in the last book. And
does anything really come out of Han and Lando's trip other than establishing their relationship with Card? Because I don't think they get Ghent.
Well, they help Luke escape, I guess.
Sort of. They distract Card enough that.
Well, no, I mean at the end when like he's arrested by Imperials.
No, I mean just with their actual visit in the.
With their actual visit.
Yeah.
I guess the best thing would be like, or the most significant thing is like they get confirmation that there's a Grand Admiral.
Yeah. Okay. So other than that, like we get more out of their relationship with Card with Katana Fleet. That's kind of what they're setting up for. So I don't know if there's much
Yeah, they mostly learn about. It's mostly like we mostly learn about Card, and he learns that there's a Grand Admiral, but they don't get a name, and yeah.
So yeah, I guess that just gets us to the escape then. Luke uses his hand to power a door.
Pretty cool.
Which I thought was fun.
Just it really it makes you think like how crazy power generation is in the Star Wars universe. You probably never need to change that battery out.
Yeah, so many crystals everywhere.
This book does one of those things. Some other Star Wars books do this too, where like there's a problem and like the characters like use like Star Wars problem solving to figure it out. Like, well, we can't bypass the motivator, so we'll have to go through this. And then, it's like I'm trying to think of another example in the book. The best one, like when Luke's fixing his X-wing, for example, and like him and basically the chapter is just him and R2 like trying to figure out how to fix it. It's like,
I just need 1,000 kilometers of wire.
Yeah, exactly.
We gotta have that lying around.
Yeah. And then Luke goes to sleep and he's like, "Good luck." Ours doesn't even have hands, like spooling like 10 kilometers of wire, you know?
If a dumb labor droid could do it, can't you do it, R2?
Yeah. Um, but yeah, and I guess another example would be when like Lando and Han are just like, there's just like two like handymen, like Star Wars handymen figuring shit out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I like those scenes. They're fun.
Yeah. Is there even much to like? I guess we can talk about Luke and Mara's relationship a little bit more. We already talked about it a lot earlier, and kind of like Mara's upset about him. I guess she's more than upset about him killing.
Yeah, because she was the Emperor's
Emperor.
hand, and
Yeah, and I don't think it's come up yet, but like she has voices in her head telling her she must kill Luke Skywalker.
Right. No, we didn't get any of that yet.
Because I think that's all when we start getting more of her perspective in, I think in Dark Force Rising.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what keeps her so motivated and so hateful of Luke, and then that's how the clone situation kind of resolves it.
Yeah.
But it's basically just programming by Palpatine.
Yeah.
So
I like too when she finds out that she wasn't the only Emperor's hand.
Yeah, that's gotta suck.
Yeah, because she basically thinks she's like very special girl.
Yeah, so Luke's inability to fly the skip ray with it, like he never lets on to his broken hand the whole time with her, and that's why he can't really do much. And like he's using like a makeshift,
like a sleigh almost, or
sleigh to pull R2 around, and he drops it once or twice, and they're like, "This, get a load of this."
Look at this jackass.
And he never lets up with that. So
no.
He
one thing we didn't talk about was Bothans and Phalia and the
Manny
whole
Bothans.
Yeah, Manny Bothans, Phalia, and the whole sort of internal.
Yeah.
But I guess that's Phalia is such a dick, but like you don't see it as much. He's like he's very like shrouded in this book. Like he's always pretending to be nice. He's furs rippling politely. You know, we get more of his like outright just like assholishness.
Yeah,
later,
because the fallout from Sluis Fan ends up being the big thing that shifts. There's a power struggle between the direct one is between Akbar and Phalia. Phalia kind of wants the Supreme Commander position,
but it's like like they're factions though. Like
and Phalia eventually wants to be Chief of State, but he thinks that his stepping stone for that is going to be as Supreme Commander. So he's trying to undermine Akbar. There's a lot of the military who are like Akbar supporters or Phalia supporters. And so that struggle plays out a lot more in Dark Force Rising. But we get a lot of the setup for that where like, we see Borsk being a complete dick.
I mean, we learn too like how much of this is being manipulated by Thrawn as well. Because Thrawn is like helping. Because there's a scene in the next book, I think, where like Thrawn attacks a New Republic convoy, and like they've got A-wings there protecting them, and Thrawn's like, "Look at this shit!" You can tell like the New Republic's suffering because you can tell the New Republic's suffering with Akbar not at the helm, basically.
I kind of like picturing all Thrawn and Pelian's interactions that way as like a Robot Chicken sketch, how they would have done it.
Yeah,
it's just.
Arms, look at this guy, like arms waving and shit. Impotent A-wings everywhere.
So the escape and the battle at the city, that all happens before, because Han and Lando go from the battle to Sluis Fan. But is there really anything else with that battle to talk about? I think it's just like shooty, slicey. Column he falls down.
No, not really. I mean, the bit with Lando is kind of cool, I guess. Lando and I forget. Aves, yeah. That part's good, but I don't think there's really much to say. Just read that part. It's fine. The most interesting thing is just Luke doesn't have his Force powers. It did kind of bother me a little bit that like I wish they kind of did like updates more because like the action is like progressing and Luke's like in the city, and I don't know whether he's got his Force powers back. Like I don't know.
Well, I think that's kind of supposed to be. That's the part of it. Like, are they going to be there? Are they not?
Yeah. So, fair enough. I guess we should mention too. We haven't really talked about Luke's powers because he is pretty damn powerful in this book. We didn't talk about Bimasari when they get raided by the Nogri. Luke kills like 10 of them basically with a single
saber
he throws
throw.
the saber, and it's just like he's powerful, and he's very Jedi-esque, like, because he doesn't want to kill. He, even when he does like pretty, what I think I would call mundane deceptions, like, when he pretends to be Mara, basically. He's like, is this something a Jedi should really be doing? We get a lot more of that in the Thrawn Duology, where Luke basically does like some self-reflection, and he's like, yeah, I've been way too handsy with the Force. I've been doing too much hood rat shit with my friends. And he kind of like steps back. And then like the other stuff just like, it's like, nah, Luke's just going to kill things. But in this, he's very cognizant of like the role of a Jedi, because he's also scared. Like he's worried about becoming Darth Vader or making another Darth Vader. He's scared to train Leia. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I do like about Last Jedi, though, is that like we've already seen the version of Luke that like powers through that, gets 80 trillion students killed, but he eventually does get the order back.
Yeah.
But that I do like the fact that we already got that, and then with TLJ we got the version of Luke that is like, he tried that a little bit, was nervous about it, it failed with Ben in the biggest way that it could, and then he cuts off completely.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, we don't need to get into TLJ, but
no, but I think ultimately people's idea of like what a Jedi should be is kind of ruined by the prequels, where they're shown to be fighting a war, but like the whole point is that they shouldn't be. Because like Luke refuses to kill Vader to fight Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. Like that is, a Jedi doesn't have to be defenseless. He was like that because he was scared of falling to the dark side, but like still you've got to, I think, really like even games like, you know, people always talk about the Force Unleashed, but like being a Jedi is less about, you know, killing things, and I'd say it's even less about defending the galaxy than being like kind of a force for good, I think.
Yeah. Or not being explicitly a force for evil, or making sure your first priority is not becoming a force for evil.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that this handles that really well. But it's The Last Jedi is very similar to, in a lot of ways, to the Thrawn duology, but we'll talk about that when we get there.
But yeah, so now Han and Lando are heading to Sluis Fan because they want to get, that's like the closest place they can get repairs or something, Luke is what they decide.
Yeah,
which is clearly bullshit.
Yeah,
but,
clearly.
But whatever.
They should have had it so they wanted to check up on the raids from earlier, would have been better, but
yeah, they're nearby and then they get to the right place. But whatever, they end up in the right place. Star Wars. But we get the scene I was talking about earlier that I really like with Wedge and Arcus or Harkness or
where like he's just drinking coffee and like and or Wedge is drinking tea and he's like, man, I'm actually being kind of a dick here.
yeah, he's still Wedge.
Yeah,
we're seeing the maturity he gained over the course of the X-Wing books before they were written.
A little bit.
So
also meant to mention the on that note, there's Han and the General a bit too, but that's just kind of ties in with print courtship, I guess. But yeah, you're right. That it's a nice little X-Wing short story there.
And it's kind of used to back up the whole Akbar versus Felia rivalry, because I think
Wedge is pro Akbar.
Keep calling him Arcus is pro Felia, or some of the people I run into are. But while they're waiting for this routine stuff to happen, Thrawn jumps into the system. Sluis Fan is going to be this is the big part of the campaign. All the other operations we're doing is secondary. Yeah. And they've got 51 mole miners.
Yeah, and there's 51, I think. And they've got a lot. They want to make off with a few dozen capital ships, because there's just for some, we talked earlier about how the New Republic basically has logistics problems, and there's been this attack on the Sluisi sector So they've not decommissioned capital ships, but they're using them to transport cargo.
Yeah.
And they're basically sitting undefended. Well, not undefended at Sluis Fawn, because Sluis Fawn does have its own defense force. There are like hundreds of ships there, but Thrawn's whole plan is to get in there after sowing the destruction, and then basically collect his prizes.
Yeah. Like he's got the freighter, which has they've like mocked up to be damaged to kind of disguise the fact that it's full, and they've got cloaks on all of the mole miners, or within the transport rather. It's not every mole miner's cloaked, I don't think.
Yeah.
But that the transport just explodes, sends the mole miners everywhere, and all confusion. They start boring into the ships, and it's going very much in the Imperial's favor. Thrawn telling like, we don't want to engage too heavily, belaying all those orders.
Yeah.
And it's going fine until Lando shows up.
Yeah, because Lando's been injured. Oh, I think I just lost Corey. Just a second.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I lost you for a second there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way the battle is resolved is basically just Lando saying, hey, I can turn those on. They just bore straight through the ships.
They like wreck them, but like it's not quite as bad as it might have been.
Yeah, and I think Thrawn does get a few out.
It seems like he does, but we don't really see them later.
Yeah, so it's not anywhere near what he needs for the campaign.
No. Well, did he get any out? Because
I thought he got at least
all the I guess most of all the mole miners would have went off. Well, actually, he says.
There was one that was like making it to the jump point by the time they got there. But I may have just been extrapolating, saying that and thinking that some got out, but nothing significant really gets out.
It's interesting too how cloaking in this case is not. It doesn't cloak the ship visually. It just hides the interior from sensors, and that kind of varies depending on. Like when Thrawn raids that planet with asteroids, I don't remember if or when he raids Coruscant with asteroids. I mean, I think those are visually cloaked as well. But like when it comes, like when they test out the cloaking on the freighter, for example, it doesn't disappear. They lose the signal on it. The freighter doesn't have a visual cloak because they can still see it. Because they say it doesn't change, but because the whole thing is the freighter is flying in. They think it's a normal freighter. But the interior is hidden, which is where the cloaking comes in. I don't think that's right, Dai, but it might be, I guess. He's saying that it's the mole miners inside the ship that are cloaked, but they talk about how they're putting the cloaking on the freighter.
Yeah, I think it's just like the hold has the cloak in it, where the mole miners are within that area and they're cloaked while they're there. But yeah, so Thrawn's big attempt to get a bunch of capital ships and stuff is broken. So where is he going to? So my big question for you here is, with that force of ships out of commission, that he's not getting those, where could he possibly get that many new ships?
Yeah, like there needs to be some sort of force of darkness that could rise to the challenge. That he could somehow crew. But I guess we'll have to wait until further books. Yeah. Or maybe he'll just use those Star Destroyers he has.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that's Heir to the Empire.
Yep. I mean, the battle at the end isn't... It's mostly... it's kind of a traditional like X-Wing style battle where...
Yeah,
follow mostly the Falcon and the dogfighting and stuff. It's pretty cool though. There's a cool scene where Rogue Squadron's like in a battle. It's very Return of the Jedi-esque because they talk about like fighting around a cruiser, and then the Falcon flies over. It's a pretty cool image. The final battle I quite enjoy though. It's good.
Yeah, the cocky space troopers and stuff.
Yeah, and listening in on the messages.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool little moments with it.
Yeah.
Like the skirmishing throughout the ships that's going on, even when they're cleaning up. It's like, what? And ended up flying into the
yeah. It's like they destroyed a Corellian Corvette just to be a dick, basically. Yeah, I mean yeah. I also like how Imperials are generally pretty competent in this. Like the one thing we didn't mention, I really liked when they're on Merkur, how the stormtroopers, like, even though they don't really know that it's Luke Skywalker, they still do all of, like, they launch the perfect, like, capture maneuver. They pincer the they pincer the, what's it called, like Luke and Mara when they're walking through the woods, and then when they're walking through the city, they're just
Yeah.
very professional. They come out a realistic way with their chariot assault vehicles and their ATST, or sorry, not their ATST, their speeders and stuff. I don't know, it's just pretty cool.
Yeah, all the battle scenes I think were done pretty well. Like not quite to the intricate detail level of X-wing dogfights for space
Yeah,
battles.
it's not what it's
Uh,
about though.
yeah, the even Bill Bringy, we only get like a broad overview
Yeah, that's
for
got
a
kind
lot
of
of
like
it.
a Return of the Jedi situation where there's like three different
Hmm.
things going on, and like if you think about like the Battle of Endor, like no one knows, like
Hmm.
the kind of grand strokes, how they blow up the SSD and stuff, but you know.
An A-wing flies into it with nothing else contributing.
On that note, I did have this in my notes. I like this is something the new canon's touched on pretty heavily with the. Did you read the Battlefront book? Um,
No.
they touched on it within the Battlefront book and Lost Stars especially. How like the Empire, like yeah, they still have lots of like personnel, but like between the first Death Star, the Executor, and the second Death Star, they've like lost all of their best talent. It's like yeah, maybe 3 million people is not necessarily a death blow to the Empire, but it's like you've lost 3 million of the best of the best. You've
Yeah.
lost like the top 1%. So
Yeah, this is where like all the best people go to get promoted, and
yeah.
some of them get murdered, but still, you're the best and brightest are all
Hmm.
gone. But yeah,
Yeah.
just the disruptive force that had on the ability for the Empire to.
Yeah, totally. And it's like most of the bridge Pelion is like women and children. He doesn't say children, but it's like young people and women basically, he says.
Mhm. We got several emails. If you want to get to that now, or is there anything else you want to say before we get to those?
Uh no, I guess the only other thing, the Empire. I guess people probably wonder, like, when they read this then later stories, where's the Empire? And the Essential Guide to Warfare kind of talks about the fact that Thrawn basically leaves most of the, because like he did kind of unify the warlords, or like he
Yeah, he
unified
kind of
imperial powers, but he leaves them
they get
basically.
some resources directed towards him.
Yeah.
They stay a lot politically independent for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
but a
Yeah,
lot of that gets beyond the scope of what the Thrawn trilogy actually covers,
totally.
where we don't hear too much about the internal affairs of the Empire, just
And that's a bit of a
the
that's a bit
fleet
of a
he's in charge
retcon
of.
to kind of, well,
Yeah.
we do hear mention of like the ruling council, I think, or some imperial
Hmm.
council. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, like the Essential Guide to Warfare talks about how Kane almost gave him his Superstar Destroyer.
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
we get some stuff like the planets they're taking, like you are now under the Imperial rule,
right.
or back under the rule of Imperial law. But
All right. So do you want to read questions before we do the ranking, or
yeah, so we're gonna get to the emails first. If anyone has any questions they want us to get to in the chat, leave them in the chat now, and we'll,
we've got a
if you want
lot
to
of email
tag,
questions though, so we might not.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, we got 4 emails this week. Two, like we both read all of them. We really appreciate them. We might have to skim just to the question parts of them rather than reading the whole thing,
Hmm.
because we are already 3 hours deep.
Yeah.
But we really do appreciate the emails.
And keep
We get a
sending them
lot of,
because yeah.
yeah,
All right. So Logan asked, "Who the heck is Thrawn?" I think we covered that. He's
yeah,
basically a Chiss, like a species from the unknown region. He's a master tactician. He spent much of the Galactic Civil War out in the unknown regions trying to like pacify and bring imperial culture and rule, well, quasi imperial rule. I do like how Pelion says a few times how things would be different if Thrawn was commanding at Endor, because like at the very end, I guess that's one thing I wanted to mention. Pelion's expecting Thrawn because the beginning stages of his plan are messed up. He's like, well, I guess we're just gonna kill ourselves now
yeah,
in battle, and Thrawn's like, no, like this is just like shit, dude. Don't worry. This was just um uh a first step that we screwed up. So
hmm
um
uh, if so, for anyone in the chat that's putting a question that you want us to answer for the podcast, if you could just put like question in all caps
Yeah.
beforehand, so it's a bit easier to spot in the chat,
Yeah.
maybe. But our second question here from Will, what kind of bear is best? Polar.
Yeah.
My real question is, which Star Wars author do you think brings space battles to life the most, or which one just makes them play out like a movie in your head? I think Zahn does very well with both capital ships and starfighter combat. So do you have an opinion on that so far? Maybe just limiting it to what we've read
I
thus
mean,
far.
Stackpole gets the scale right, I think. Actually, I don't know. Stackpole, I think, does a really good job on like individual fighter stuff. But I think Aaron Alston does better when it comes to capital ship stuff. But even though Zahn was much simpler, he really captured the the battle. I think he sets it up in an interesting way, and actually kind of captured for me the feel of like the Battle of Endor at Return of the Jedi the most. So I'm actually gonna go kind of surprising maybe to some people and say Zahn.
Yeah, I think Zahn manages to balance it with the plot overall better, but I do think that just for their own sake, that Stackpole and Alston do the better space combat. Probably Stackpole.
Okay.
And it worked really well with X-Wing, where like that kind of was what the books were, where it's
I mean, the Battle of the Lusankya is really cool.
Yeah, that's
like a highlight, I think, for me.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna go with Stackpole, but
there's lots of good space combat to come.
Zahn's up there as well.
Okay, so hold on. Is there anything else in that email? Any other questions?
No.
Okay.
So there's actually, for the next email, there's kind of two that are from both Neil and Duncan, and we also just got a question from Nathan in the chat, and probably a few others, but that's just what jumped out at me.
Okay.
That how Thrawn compares in new canon to this canon.
Right.
That's the general gist of what all three of them were going for. So if you want to...
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think Thrawn as a character, they pretty much nailed in new canon. Even in Rebels, I think they did a good job. The stories have been weaker, just because they've been so limited, I think. But the character, they've done a really good job with. He's still out there. I have high hopes that we get a really good Thrawn series. I mean, they've invested pretty heavily, and I'm like, I never would have believed that we would see Thrawn on a TV show, because everyone who knows the expanded universe knows Thrawn. But, I've said this before, my friends are hardcore Star Wars fans. I've got huge friends that, they love Star Wars. They'll watch The Mandalorian. They wouldn't even know who Thrawn is, just because the EU is such a small portion of Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're, there is a lot to say about the fact that Disney did, close the Legends stuff. That's a conversation for another day. But the fact that they're giving such a loved Legends character among, let's be honest, a minority of people who read Legends, like the spotlight in various ways, is pretty cool.
Yeah. And the thing is, Thrawn is being made by the same person who made Thrawn.
Yeah.
Like, it's still the new Thrawn books were still made by Zahn.
Yeah.
I think the Thrawn we get in Rebels is slightly more in line with the Thrawn trilogy Thrawn, because he's still set up more as villain McBad guy, but because that show is more directed towards younger audiences, he's not like complete caricature bad guy, but we do get more of the version of Thrawn that would have killed Peterson than we get in like Outbound Flight, which lines up better with what Zahn is doing in the new Thrawn trilogy. And as I've already said, I do think that like the version of Thrawn I like the most is the Outbound Flight version of Thrawn, which lines up most with what we get in the new trilogy. Even though I do agree that the overall plot of the new Thrawn trilogy kind of falls flat, because like we know where it's going. They don't have much freedom to go. Like it's all already established. It's
nothing really changes.
We know he's going to end up in a big whale mouth, and he's probably going to come out of that. But that's why I'm really looking forward actually to the Ascendancy trilogy. I'm not sure when that's going to be set, but if it's set slightly after, at a point where we know it can diverge more, or we're not 100% sure.
Some of it's going to be a prequel at least.
Yeah. So, but that's kind of my take on that.
My hope is like, honestly, my hope is after we get episode 9 out of the way, I think there's two options. Either I think that there's a chance that Episode 9 is treated like the war to end all wars, and after that, the universe is just done. I think that that's a possibility, and like they focus mostly on the past. Otherwise, I don't see why you can't bring Thrawn back to be a new villain or to be a new like to give him room to work with in a new time period, kind of just like the same thing that happened with Legends. Like, okay, he was in a space whale, but he could be who knows where.
Yeah. Well, Dave Filoni's even said like we didn't explicitly kill him off because we want them to be free to use them. We needed to resolve his plot for the show, but also like they're very much planning for Zahn specifically to bring him back. Like I would be shocked if that didn't happen.
The only tough part is I wish they left more. I honestly wish they would have left the New Republic era before Episode 7. I wish they would have not covered it as much because they've kind of basically outlined the fact that there wasn't a lot of conflict during it.
Yeah. So if we see anything in that period, it would have to be anything he's doing in the unknown regions that isn't order. But I think they've been pretty clear on like the point of the sequel trilogy being about resolving the Skywalker storyline.
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of what they've done best in like the stuff that I've enjoyed most is the stuff that isn't part of the mainline series. So like I really like Rogue One. I really like what they're doing with Mandalorian.
Yeah.
So I can see them still being fine with there being other major wars. It's just wars that aren't about the Skywalkers.
It's just I kind of feel like they're going for something like I don't know, like the whole like Rey and Kylo Ren thing. I think they're clearly supposed to be like I don't know, like some sort of like avatars, kind of like Anakin was in a way. So I just feel like they might be going for like I don't know, like a yin and a yang thing. And when they finally, this is like coming into some Reylo shit probably. I'm not like into that, but it's just like I think there's themes that they might decide to go with that would, kind of see. I don't know, because like the prophecy or whatever the grand thing in the Star Wars series is, like whether the prophecy is fulfilled and there's balance or whatever else. I don't know. I think that's a way they might end up going, and then they might decide that okay, well, like all of these things have happened, and maybe there is no more conflict. Like maybe there is actually finally peace or whatever. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, this is probably more of a discussion for like a post.
Yes.
The last Rise of the Last Skywalker, Jedi, Return of the Sith, Phantom Menace clone, Attack of the Jedi,
the Rise of the Phantom Jedi
Strikes Back.
You listed all of them. Rogue One Solo.
But yeah, so I think that more or less covers our opinion on how Thrawn compares, and then so much more.
Yeah. We kind of covered his next question about over the top. We covered that. I think, right?
Yeah. Cold and Calculated would say his reading and art was a bit over the top, and I've already kind of gone on enough rants for one podcast about that.
Yep.
But yeah, so
he also agrees Mark Thompson is the best audiobook commentator or reader. I agree, he's phenomenal. Okay, Duncan.
Duncan asked about the same Thrawn thing, but if you want to.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, he's
kind of asking about the same the Disney novels things, and that's probably something we'll get into when we get to some of those novels.
Yeah,
maybe a bit of a long discussion to get into 3 hours deep into this podcast.
I think we covered most of it.
Yeah. So thanks for the emails, guys. If you want to send an email for the next episode asking any questions about Dark Force Rising or giving thoughts on this podcast, that's tapcaftransmissions@gmail.com. I think that'll be in the description for that. Yeah, Tapcaf without.
It's on the screen or on your podcast reader. One thing I wanted to mention, I don't know who asked this, the moving city on Niklon, I think is pretty cool. I watched your video, and I was disappointed to see it in the comic because it's basically described as like a dreadnought on a bunch of AT-ATs. Basically stays in like the shadow of the moon, or like not the shadow of the moon. It stays on the dark side of the planet, basically, so they don't get roasted. That and the shield ships are pretty cool.
Yeah. The comic just makes it look like it's a weird giant
Yeah,
steamship. It's
the art
not a
for
dreadnought.
the first book, the comic, is really bad. It gets a little better.
Yeah, and it's amazing because there's so many. Well, I guess at that no, it came out at a point where there'd be enough dreadnought fan art that they could have traced for it.
Certainly, yeah,
Uh,
certainly.
but was Thrawn a Sherlock Holmes? And Nathan asks also, was Thrawn a Sherlock Holmes analog like he's in the new trilogy? Could you see him joining our line with the New Republic post Endor?
Not this
Uh,
version.
yeah, not the Thrawn trilogy version, but the version retconned into with
Yeah,
uh,
probably would have had he been
yeah,
reborn. It's like one thing I did.
the
Yeah,
Empire of the Hand was basically gearing up for that, and they did cooperate with the New Republic.
yeah.
So if we take what Park did as kind of a stand-in for Thrawn,
hmm
uh,
Which is
then
kind
I
of
think we're
interesting
definitely
because even though Mara and Luke know that, they're like, don't try to save him, or I guess they don't try to kill him either. But like Luke's like kind of belated. Well, he's like kind of happy when Thrawn dies, and I'm like, are you serious? Like he would have been probably your greatest ally, but whatever.
yeah, I could. Well, just the threat of Thrawn was throwing things into such disarray
Yeah,
that even if Thrawn was like, "Yeah, I'm cool with you guys now,"
Thrawn's just
then
got
there'd still be enough people in the New Republic just being like, "No."
Thrawn's got a mega. No, I'm not gonna say this. Never mind. I'm gonna self censor.
Uh, what do you think is the best first way to learn about Thrawn for newbies? Listen to this
Yeah,
and the
listen to
next two
this
episodes
on.
of Tapcaf
Yeah,
Transmissions.
yep.
You hear
Don't read the
everything you need to
books.
know. Or play Thrawn's Revenge.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's it.
Thrawn does say he's working on an assumption that the departure logs pulled from Nomad City computers were accurate when they said Lando was one of the Han, Leia on the other. I mean, that isn't really the part that I had issues with, but I kind of spent 15 minutes on that already, so I won't subject anyone else to my complaining for that.
Astrid
Uh,
asks a question which she thinks isn't relevant, but it actually is. How did Luke ever train anyone when he never finished his own training? That's like basically his ultimate issue here. Like he doesn't feel qualified. Like he's like, oh, I wish I could ask somebody this question. Like Leia asks him, like, is this maybe harder for me because I have some training already and it's hard for me to break that? And Luke's like, probably, but I don't know, and I wish I had somebody to ask.
we will look into that and we will get back to you.
Yeah, let me just check Coruscant real quick.
And any other questions we missed? I guess we'll do the book rankings.
Yeah.
We've missed anything.
You want to go first?
Okay, so my rankings as they stand so far, and I really next episode I already
Done
have a
with
way
this.
to do the
Okay.
no. Next episode I have a way to visually represent it so we don't have to read the entire list every time. But
You've got
so
that.
far,
You've got that technology available to us.
I do when I'm streaming it because I have the my video thing,
Hmm.
but I can just also send you the
I got it. I could
image for
yeah.
that. But this was some too many other preparations to have it done for this week. But either way,
Okay.
it's really I'm talking about it like it's some weird technology. It's literally
Plagueis, Medstar, Iron Fist, Radar.
yeah, Plagueis, Medstar 1, Iron Fist, Wraith Squadron, Medstar Jedi Healer, Back to War, Rogue Squadron, Solo Command, Wedge's Gamble, Courtship of Princess Leia, Truce of Bakura, Kratos Trap. I am putting Heir to the Empire at number 2. Okay. I think it's still edged out by Plagueis, but I think it is slightly better than Medstar 1.
Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. For me, I'll just say my final ranking. It's Plagueis, Heir to the Empire, Rogue Squadron, Battle Surgeons, Back to War, Wedge's Gamble, Medstar Jedi Healer, Iron Fist, Courtship, Wraith, Solo, Bakura, Krytos.
Yeah, so Krytos is going to stay at the bottom for a while.
Yeah, for a long time. Like the other ones, like some of the other ones are so campy that like even that alone will probably like when we get to Anti-Force and in Crystal Star, I'll be like, this book's shit, but they just swam in a giant goo monster and they're talking about the Anti-Force.
Mm-hmm.
It's more interesting than anything that happens in Krytos.
And I guess we got that last question there. Do you want to
From Primark?
quickly? Yeah, we can quickly discuss that, and then I think that'll be it.
I don't know. Like, I don't like the idea of clones being like capable of like harnessing the Force, at least not regularly. I don't know. I don't really know enough about I can't decide. Do you have the question is for podcast listeners? Do you prefer Clone Wars as they're presented before the prequels or what we actually got?
I kind of like what we actually got, like the whole Clone Masters, where all the clones just went mad.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I think it depends more on execution. I'm sure there's a world where I enjoy that, but
Yes.
uh, I enjoyed what we got, so I'm fine with saying I
Yep.
prefer that for now.
Yep. Me too.
What is the point of airborne clone troopers when there's jetpack troopers? I mean, it's the same thing. They're just named something different.
Well, the ones here are like fully meant for like zero G and
Yeah,
vacuum combat. They've got like a really thick suit and like they can probably take like a couple like they're not gonna get sizzled by a turbo laser. Well, maybe a turbo laser, but they're not gonna get sizzled by a laser just missing them. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
um,
But I think that
yeah,
that
that's
does
it.
it.
All right,
So
guys.
that was 3 hours and 15 minutes. Originally, we were going to do some other streaming after this. Is
Yeah, it might be too late for tonight.
probably going to hold off on that.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching, everyone.
Have a great day, night, week, whatever. May the force be with you. Goodbye.
We'll be back with Dark Force Rising in 2 weeks.
Oh
Bye, everyone.
yeah, we should probably mention that on Corey's channel.
Yeah. The podcast isn't ending after this episode. We should be back December 5th. Are you?
I will let you know. I had to check in
Okay,
with my
so
wife.
we are tentatively scheduled for December 5th. We will announce when we know for sure. But that'll be on Datapad, my channel. And we'll be talking about Katana fleets.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.